A storm rages over Ashford Manor, where a locked room hides a deadly secret. Victor Crane, a ruthless financier, lies dead, a cryptic note in his hand. The truth lies in the shadow. Who among the 7 guests, each with a motive, wielded the fatal blow? Was it the scorned lover, the betrayed sister, or the quiet governess hiding a past? As Hercule Poirot's little gray cells unravel a web of betrayal, fraud, and forbidden love, one question burns. Will the killer strike again before the truth emerges from the shadows? Chapter 1. The telegram of doom. The rain lashed against the windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat. A relentless drumbeat that seemed to echo the urgency of the telegram trembling in his manicured hands. The paper, creased from his grip, bore the elegant yet frantic scrawl of Lady Eleanor Ashford, mistress of Ashford Manor, a sprawling estate nestled in the desolate Yorkshire moors. "Come at once," it pleaded. "Tragedy strikes. A guest dead. Mystery insoluble. I beg your genius, Monsieur Poirot." The words, stark and commanding, stirred the little Belgian detective's curiosity. For few things delighted him more than a puzzle that defied ordinary minds. Poirot adjusted his impeccable mustache, his green eyes glinting with the thrill of a challenge. He summoned his loyal friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, who was lounging by the fire with a novel, blissfully unaware of the storm, both literal and figurative, that awaited them. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice crisp yet tinged with excitement. "Pack your valise. We depart for Yorkshire within the hour. A matter most grave demands the attention of Hercule Poirot." Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's dramatic flourishes, set aside his book with a sigh. "Yorkshire, in this weather? What's happened, Poirot? Another of your mysterious summons?" Poirot held up the telegram, his expression one of calculated calm. "A death, Hastings, at Ashford Manor. The details are sparse, but the urgency of Lady Eleanor suggests a crime most perplexing. We must not delay." By late afternoon, the 2 men were aboard a rattling train, slicing through the sodden English countryside. The moors loomed beyond the misted windows, a bleak expanse of heather and shadow, as if the land itself guarded secrets. Hastings, ever the optimist, attempted to lighten the mood. "Perhaps it's just a natural death, Poirot. A heart attack, maybe. No need for all this cloak and dagger business." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Monsieur Hastings, a heart attack does not inspire a telegram that speaks of an insoluble mystery. Nan, this is no ordinary death. The little gray cells, they are already at work." As dusk settled, the train deposited them at a lonely station, where a dour chauffeur awaited in a sleek Rolls-Royce. The man, clad in a rain-slicked coat, introduced himself as Gibbs, the manor's driver. His face, weathered and guarded, betrayed no emotion as he led them to the car. The journey to Ashford Manor was silent, save for the howl of the wind and the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. Poirot, ever observant, noted Gibbs's white-knuckled grip on the wheel and the faint tremor in his jaw. "This man," Poirot murmured to Hastings, "he knows more than he reveals." Ashford Manor emerged from the fog like a specter, its Gothic spires piercing the gloom. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and the windows glowed with an eerie, amber light. As Gibbs ushered them inside, Poirot's sharp eyes catalogued every detail. The polished oak floors, the ancestral portraits glaring down from the walls, and the faint scent of lavender masking something acrid, almost metallic. Lady Eleanor awaited them in the grand hall, her elegant frame draped in a black silk gown, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming," she said, her voice steady despite the strain in her eyes. "I feared you might not brave the storm." Poirot bowed, his manner impeccable. "Madame, when a puzzle calls, Hercule Poirot does not hesitate. Pray, tell me of this tragedy." Lady Eleanor led them to a drawing-room, where a fire crackled in defiance of the chill. She gestured to a velvet settee, and as they sat, she began. "Last night, during a weekend gathering, one of my guests, Mr. Victor Crane, was found dead in the observatory. The door was locked from the inside, the key still in his pocket. No one could have entered or left, and yet she hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. He was not alone in his final moments. In his hand, we found this. She produced a crumpled note, its edges singed as if kissed by flame. Poirot took it with gloved hands, his eyes narrowing as he read the scrawled words. The truth lies in the shadow. The ink was smudged, the handwriting erratic, as if written in haste or fear. Most curious, Poirot murmured. And the cause of death, Madame, the doctor believes it was a heart attack. Lady Eleanor replied, but I cannot accept it. Victor was robust, a man in his prime. In this note, it suggests something sinister. Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Who else was in the house? Any enemies of this Crane fellow? Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. Victor was divisive, a financier of ruthless ambition. 7 guests were present, along with my staff. Any one of them might have wished him harm. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And the observatory, it is secure. Completely, she said. The only entrance is a heavy oak door, and the windows are barred. The key was found on Victor's body. It is impossible, Monsieur Poirot, impossible. Poirot's voice carried a hint of amusement. Non, Madame, the impossible is merely a challenge to the mind of Hercule Poirot. He requested to see the body, and Lady Eleanor led them through a maze of corridors to the observatory, a domed chamber at the manor's heart. The room was a blend of science and opulence. A gleaming telescope stood sentinel, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound books and star charts. Victor Crane lay on a Persian rug, his face frozen in a grimace of shock. His tailored suit was pristine, save for a faint stain on his cuff detail, Poirot noted with a raised eyebrow. The note, now in Poirot's possession, seemed to pulse with significance. That is Dr. Hargrove, the local physician, confirmed the heart attack diagnosis. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements precise. He examined Crane's hands, noting their calloused edges, unusual for a man of wealth. The singed note, he observed, smelled faintly of tobacco, though Crane's pipe lay cold on a nearby table. Curio, Poirot muttered, his mind already weaving connections. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot requested a list of the guests. Lady Eleanor obliged, her voice steady as she named them. Margaret Vale, a celebrated opera singer and Crane's former lover, whose career he had nearly ruined. Sir Reginald Holt, a rival financier who lost a fortune to Crane's schemes. Clara Crane, Victor's estranged sister, who resented his control over their family's legacy. Dr. Felix Mortimer, a chemist with a grudge against Crane for sabotaging his research. Isabelle Durant, a French heiress and Crane's recent fiancée, whose motives were unclear. Mr. Leonard Baxter, Crane's solicitor, rumored to have been bribed by him. Miss Emily Wren, a governess to Lady Eleanor's niece, whose quiet demeanor hid a sharp mind. Poirot listened intently, his fingers steepled. And the staff, Madame, they too must be considered. Lady Eleanor nodded. Gibbs, the chauffeur, Mrs. Hawthorne, the housekeeper, Lucy, the maid, and Mr. Thorne, the butler. They have served me loyally, but Victor's presence unsettled them. Hastings, ever eager, interjected. Sounds like a regular nest of vipers. Poirot, where do we start? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. We start, mon ami, with the note. The truth lies in the shadow. It is not merely a clue, but a challenge. Someone in this house wishes to play a game with Hercule Poirot, and I, Mies Amos, never lose. The guests were summoned, and as they gathered, Poirot observed their faces. Margaret's defiant glare, Sir Reginald's nervous twitch, Clara's icy composure. Each carried a secret, and Poirot's keen senses detected the undercurrent of fear. He addressed them with his usual flair, his voice commanding yet soothing. Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has befallen this house. But fear not, for Hercule Poirot is here. The truth, it hides in the shadows, but I shall bring it into the light. A murmur rippled through the room. Margaret Vale tossed her head, her voice sharp. This is absurd. Victor had a weak heart. Why conjure a mystery where none exists? Poirot's eyes gleamed. A weak heart, mademoiselle. Yet the note in his hand suggests otherwise. Tell me, did you see Monsieur Crane last night? Margaret faltered, her bravado slipping. I retired early. I saw nothing. Sir Reginald snorted. Convenient, Margaret. We all know you hated him, and you didn't. Clara Crane snapped, her voice cutting like glass. Victor ruined you, Reginald. Don't pretend otherwise. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing storm. Enough. Each of you will speak with me in turn. The truth, it does not hide for long. As the guests dispersed, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression one of quiet confidence. The note, Hastings, is the key. Its words are deliberate, its condition curious. Someone wished it to be found, yet feared its discovery. We shall begin with the shadows of Ashford Manor. The chapter closed with Poirot standing by the observatory window, the storm outside mirroring the tempest within. He clutched the singed note, his mind racing. The guests, reassured by his presence, retired to their rooms, but the air was thick with suspicion. Poirot's little gray cells were alight, and the game, he knew, had only just begun. Chapter 2. The Guests of Suspicion. The morning after Hercule Poirot's arrival at Ashford Manor broke with a pallor that seemed to seep from the Yorkshire moors themselves. The mist curling around the estate like a conspirator's whisper. The grand dining room, with its towering windows and mahogany table polished to a mirror's sheen, was a stage for Poirot's first act of inquiry. The 7 guests, summoned by Lady Eleanor Ashford to face the great detective, sat in a semicircle of unease, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Victor Crane, the ruthless financier whose death had drawn Poirot to this isolated manor, lay in the morgue below, his body as silent as the cryptic note found in his hand. The truth lies in the shadow. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small, precise figure commanding the room with an authority that belied his unassuming stature. His mustache, impeccably groomed, quivered slightly as he surveyed the assembly, his green eyes glinting like polished jade. "Mies, Amos," he began, his voice a velvet cadence. "We are gathered to unravel a most lamentable affair. Monsieur Victor Crane is dead, and it is not, I assure you, by the hand of fate alone. One among you, or perhaps more, knows more than they have yet confessed. Let us proceed with order and method. Nest CEPA." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their chairs creaking in the heavy silence. Poirot's gaze lingered on each in turn, as if peeling back the layers of their carefully curated facades. There was Lady Eleanor herself, the hostess, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes clouded with grief yet sharp with resolve. Beside her sat her nephew, Charles Ashford, a man in his 30s whose boyish charm was undercut by a nervous tic in his jaw. Across from him was Evelyn Marwood, a striking woman with raven hair and a gaze that could cut glass, her fingers toying with a pearl necklace as if it were a lifeline. Next to her, Sir Reginald Holt, a retired barrister, with a face like weathered parchment, clutched a cane with knuckles too white for mere arthritis. Then came Dr. Simon Balfour, a physician whose calm demeanor seemed a touch too practiced. Clara Vane, a young actress with a porcelain complexion and eyes that darted like a trapped bird. And finally, Thomas Reddington, a burly industrialist, whose ruddy cheeks and clenched fists suggested a man unaccustomed to restraint. Poirot clapped his hands, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "We begin with the facts. Monsieur Crane was found dead in the observatory, locked from the inside, at approximately midnight. The cause of death, pending the coroner's report, appears to be a heart attack, but I, Hercule Poirot, do not accept coincidence so readily." A note was found in his hand, and now I learn of a torn photograph discovered in his study. Let us explore these threads, one by one. He produced a photograph, its edges jagged where it had been ripped in half. The image showed Victor Crane, his stern features unmistakable, standing beside a figure whose face was missing, torn away. The background was a blurred garden, Perhaps the very one surrounding Ashford Manor. Poirot held it aloft, letting the morning light catch its surface. This photograph, Ms. Amos, is a puzzle within a puzzle. Who is this missing person? And why was the image destroyed? Lady Eleanor cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the strain in her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, Victor was a private man, but he kept many such photographs. He was sentimental in his way, though he'd never admit it. That could be anyone, friend, family, or foe. Precisement, Poirot replied, his tone deceptively mild. And yet, someone thought it significant enough to tear. I shall require each of you to tell me what you know of Monsieur Crane's connections, his allies, his enemies, his secrets. We shall start with you, Lady Eleanor, as the gracious hostess. Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, but she nodded. Victor was a dear friend of my late husband, Lord Ashford. He visited often, especially in recent years, to advise on investments. He was uncompromising in business, which made him enemies, but here, he was a guest like any other. I know nothing of that photograph. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, but he moved on. Monsieur Charles Ashford, what can you tell me of your uncle's friend? Charles leaned back, his fingers drumming on the table. Victor was a shark. Monsieur Poirot, he loaned me money for a venture last year, a shipping company. When it failed, he demanded repayment with interest. That would have ruined me. I argued with him the night he died, I'll admit, but I didn't kill him. I was in my room by 11, reading. A shark, you say, Poirot mused, and yet you remained under his roof. Curious, Nan. He turned to Evelyn Marwood, whose posture stiffened. Mademoiselle Marwood, I understand you and Monsieur Crane were once close. Evelyn's laugh was brittle, like glass on the verge of shattering. Close, that's a polite way to put it. Victor and I were engaged, years ago, until he broke it off for a better prospect. He thought he could buy my affection back, with gifts, but I came here to tell him I was done with his games. I saw him in the drawing room that evening, but I left him alive. Poirot's mustache twitched. A woman scorned, perhaps, has a memory that does not fade. And you, Sir Reginald. The barrister's voice was gravelly, his eyes fixed on the table. Crane was my client. Once he cheated me out of a partnership in a property dealer manner, not unlike this one. I came to confront him, to demand what was mine. We spoke in the library, but I retired early. I'm too old for murder. Monsieur Poirot, Age Poirot said softly, is no barrier to motive. He turned to Dr. Balfour, whose calm facade faltered under the detective's scrutiny. Doctor, you examined Monsieur Crane's body. What did you observe? Balfour adjusted his glasses, his voice measured. As I told Lady Eleanor, it appeared to be a heart attack. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle. I noted a faint smell of almonds on his breath, which could suggest cyanide, but I had no equipment to confirm. I last saw him at dinner, perfectly healthy. Cyanide, Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful, a suggestion most intriguing. And you, Mademoiselle Vane? Clara Vane's voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes wide. I barely knew Mr. Crane. I'm here as Lady Eleanor's guest, performing in a local play. He funded the theater, but we only spoke briefly. He seemed angry, but I don't know why. I was rehearsing lines in my room that night. Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her trembling hands. And finally, Monsieur Reddington. Thomas Reddington's voice boomed, his face flushed. Crane was a crook. He swindled me out of a factory deal, promised me a stake, then sold it out from under me. I told him what I thought of him in the billiard room, but I didn't touch him. I was smoking in the conservatory till late. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. 7 guests, 7 motives, and yet only one truth. Let us consider the photograph again. He placed it on the table. It's torn, edged stark against the polished wood. This image was found in Monsieur Crane's study, hidden in a book of poetry. Why poetry, I wonder? A man of finance, not of sentiment, one would think. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. I propose a small exercise. Each of you will write down the name of someone, anyone you believe might be the missing figure in this photograph. You will not share it with each other, but with me alone. This will aid my little gray cells." The guests exchanged wary glances but complied, scribbling names on slips of paper provided by the butler. Poirot collected them, his expression unreadable as he tucked them into his waistcoat pocket. "Merci. Now, let us discuss the evening of the murder." Dinner was served at 8, yes, and Monsieur Crane retired to the observatory shortly after 10. "Who saw him after dinner?" Evelyn raised her hand. "I did, as I said. In the drawing room, around 9:30. He was drinking brandy, looking out at the garden. And I," Charles added, "I passed him in the hall, heading toward the observatory. He seemed in a hurry." Poirot nodded. "And the rest of you? Where were you between 9 and midnight?" The answers came in a flurry. Sir Reginald in his room, Dr. Balfour in the library, Clara in her room, Reddington in the conservatory, Lady Eleanor overseeing the staff. Poirot listened, his head tilted, as if hearing a melody beneath their words. "A symphony of alibis," he murmured. "But one note is discordant." He turned abruptly to the butler, who hovered near the door. "Monsieur, you served the dinner. Did anything strike you as unusual?" The butler, a wiry man named Jenkins, hesitated. "Well, sir, Mr. Crane seemed distracted. He barely touched his food, and he kept glancing at Miss Marwood. I thought it ought, given their history." Evelyn's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Distracted, you say? And did you notice anything else? Perhaps something misplaced, or someone where they should not have been?" Jenkins frowned, then nodded. "Now that you mention it, sir, I saw Miss Vane near the observatory door, round 10. She looked startled when I passed, but I thought she was just lost." Clara gasped, her hands flying to her face. I was looking for the library. I got turned around in the corridors. I didn't go near Mr. Crane." Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. To be lost is not a crime, but to lie, that is another matter." He turned to the group, his voice firm. "I have learned much this morning, but the truth remains in the shadow, as the note suggests. I will now retire to consider these matters. I suggest you all reflect on what you have seen and heard. The little gray cells, they work best in silence." As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes on the torn photograph. He murmured to himself, "The shadow is not merely a metaphor. I think it is a place, a moment, a person." He slipped the photograph into his pocket and made his way to the study, where the book of poetry awaited. The study was a cavern of dark wood and leather, its shelves groaning under the weight of financial ledgers and legal tomes. The book of poetry, a slim volume of Keats, seemed an anomaly. Poirot opened it to the page where the photograph had been hidden, his fingers tracing the lines. "Beauty is truth, truth beauty," he read aloud. "Monsieur Crane, what beauty did you seek to conceal?" He examined the room, his movements precise. A desk drawer yielded a letter, half written, addressed to an unknown recipient. "I know what you did, and I will not forgive. Meet me at the Oak tonight." The signature was Crane's, but the letter was unfinished. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The oak, the ancient tree in the garden, mentioned by the groundskeeper. A meeting planned, but never completed. He returned to the dining room, where Lady Eleanor waited alone. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "you suspect one of us, don't you?" "Suspicion," Poirot replied, "is the seed from which truth grows, but it must be tended carefully. Tell me, Lady Eleanor, did Monsieur Crane ever speak of a shadow in his past, a regret, perhaps, or a betrayal?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Once, years ago, he mentioned a partner. He wronged a man who vanished after a deal went sour. He never spoke of it again, but I sensed it haunted him." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Merci, madame, you have given me a thread to follow." He excused himself, his thoughts turning to the names on the slips of paper. He spread them out in his room, reading each in turn. Charles had written unknown, Evelyn, a lover, Sir Reginald, a rival, Balfour, a stranger, Clara, no one, Reddington, an enemy, and Lady Eleanor, a ghost, a ghost. Poirot murmured, "Or perhaps a shadow." He folded the papers, his mind alight with possibilities. The photograph, the note, the letter, they were pieces of a mosaic, and he was beginning to see its shape. He narrowed his focus to 3 suspects: Evelyn Marwood, whose broken engagement gave her a personal motive; Charles Ashford, whose financial ruin pointed to desperation; and Sir Reginald Holt, whose legal history with Crane suggested a deeper grudge. The chapter closed with Poirot standing at his window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded moors. The household, though still tense, felt a flicker of hope. Poirot's calm assurance, his methodical unraveling of their secrets, had restored a fragile order. But the detective knew the truth was still elusive, hidden in the shadow of a torn photograph and a dead man's final words. Chapter 3. The midnight whisper. The clock in Ashford Manor's Grand Hall had just struck midnight, its sonorous chimes reverberating through the cavernous corridors, when a scream shattered the uneasy silence. Hercule Poirot, clad in a silk dressing gown of impeccable cut, emerged from his guest room with the alertness of a man half his age. His mustache twitched as he adjusted his pince-nez, his keen eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. The scream, he noted, had come from the east wing, where the library and the servants' quarters converged. Without hesitation, he moved toward the sound, his polished shoes silent on the Persian runner. The manor was a labyrinth of secrets, its oak-paneled walls and heavy draperies seeming to absorb whispers of intrigue. Earlier that day, Poirot had interviewed the 7 guests, each a suspect in the mysterious death of Victor Crane. The financier found lifeless in the locked observatory. The cryptic note in Crane's hand, "The truth lies in the shadow," had set Poirot's little gray cells alight. And now this scream promised a new thread in the tapestry of the case. As he approached the library, Poirot found a small crowd gathered at the threshold. Lady Eleanor Ashford, her silver hair loose and her face pale, clutched a candelabrum that cast flickering shadows across her furrowed brow. Beside her stood Dr. Julian Hargreaves, the family physician, his spectacles fogged with nervous perspiration. The other guests: Miss Clara Beaumont, the jilted opera singer; Mr. Reginald Voss, the cheated business partner; Miss Evelyn Crane, Victor's vengeful sister; Mr. Thomas Langley, a rival financier; and Mrs. Beatrice Langley, his sharp-tongued wife, hovered nearby, their expressions a mix of fear and curiosity. The butler, Mr. Giles Pennington, stood apart, wringing his hands, his usual composure frayed. "It was Molly, the maid," Lady Eleanor said, her voice trembling but refined. "She screamed from within the library. I fear something dreadful has happened." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "Calm yourselves, Mies, Amos. Let us proceed with order. Monsieur Pennington, fetch a lantern. We shall investigate at once." The butler scurried off, returning moments later with a brass lantern that cast a warm glow. Poirot led the way into the library, a vast room lined with leather-bound tomes and dominated by a marble fireplace. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and wax. In the center of the room, Molly, the young maid, stood trembling, her apron twisted in her hands. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted toward a tapestry depicting a medieval hunt, its threads glinting in the lantern light. "Monsieur Poirot," Molly stammered, her Yorkshire accent thick with distress. "I heard it whispers, sir, coming from behind that wall. A plot, they were talking, to kill Mr. Crane. I swear it." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Whispers, you say? Be precise, mademoiselle. What did you hear, and from where exactly?" Molly pointed to the tapestry. "There, sir. I was dusting the shelves, late as it was, when I heard voices low, like they didn't want to be heard. They said something about finishing what was started, and no one must know. I got so scared, I screamed." Poirot approached the tapestry, his fingers brushing the heavy fabric. He noted its slight bulge, as if it concealed something more than stone. With a deft movement, he lifted the edge, revealing a wooden panel with a faint seam, a hidden door. The guests gasped, and Dr. Hargreaves mopped his brow. "Monsieur," Poirot murmured, "a passage cache. This manor, it seems, holds its secrets close." He pressed a panel, and with a soft click, It swung inward, revealing a narrow corridor, shrouded in darkness. The air was musty-tinged with the scent of damp stone. Poirot held the lantern aloft, its beam illuminating cobwebs and worn flagstones. "Monsieur Pennington, you will accompany me. The rest, remain here. Do not touch anything." The butler, pale but obedient, followed Poirot into the passage. The others hovered at the entrance, their whispers a soft chorus of unease. The corridor twisted downward, its walls etched with faint carvings, runes perhaps, or remnants of some forgotten ritual. After a dozen steps, they reached a small chamber, its centerpiece a heavy iron safe embedded in the wall. The safe's door was locked, its combination dial gleaming faintly in the lantern light. "A safe," Poirot said, his voice echoing softly. "And yet, no key, no combination. What secrets does it guard, I wonder?" Pennington shifted uncomfortably. "I've never seen this place, sir. The manor's old, full of odd corners, but it's unnatural." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Unnatural, perhaps, but not without purpose. Return to the library, Monsieur Pennington. I shall examine this further." Back in the library, Poirot faced Molly, who had regained some color, but still clutched her apron. "Mademoiselle Molly, tell me, what is your connection to Monsieur Crane? You are young, yet your fear suggests more than a servant's concern." The maid's eyes widened, and she glanced at Lady Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. I knew Mr. Crane before I came here, sir. He helped my family when we were in debt. Paid for my brother's medicine. He did, but he wasn't kind about it. He held it over us, said we owed him. I never told anyone, not even her ladyship." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And these whispers, they spoke of murder. Did you recognize the voices?" Molly shook her head. "No, sir. They were muffled, like through a wall. But I know what I heard. Someone wanted him dead." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Clara Beaumont, her voice melodious even in distress, spoke up. "This is preposterous. Whispers in walls. It's a ghost story, nothing more." Molly's imagining things. Nan, Poirot said, raising a finger. "The imagination, it can deceive. But the ears, they do not lie. There is a passage, and there was a conversation. We must discover who spoke, and why." He turned to the group, his presence commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, return to your rooms. I shall remain here to ponder this discovery. Tomorrow, we shall open this safe, and perhaps its contents will illuminate the shadow in which the truth lies." As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered in the library, his lantern casting long shadows across the shelves. He examined the tapestry again, noting its intricate details. A hound chasing a stag, a hunter with a bow. The scene seemed to pulse with hidden meaning, but for now, it eluded him. He returned to the passage, studying the safe. Its dial was pristine, untouched by dust, suggesting recent use. But without the combination, it remained a locked enigma. The next morning, Poirot summoned Molly to the library for a private interview. The maid arrived, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle but firm. "You must tell me all you know of Monsieur Crane's dealings with your family. Every detail. It is important." Molly hesitated, then spoke. "My father borrowed money from Mr. Crane years ago, when our farm failed. Mr. Crane was kind at first, but then he demanded favors information about the village, about Lady Eleanor's estate. I didn't want to help, but he threatened to ruin us. When I got work here, I thought I'd escaped him, but he came as a guest, and he knew I was here." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And did he speak to you during his stay?" "Only once, sir. The night of the ball. He cornered me in the pantry, said he'd tell her ladyship I was a thief if I didn't do what he asked. He wanted me to spy on Mr. Voss, to find papers in his room." "Papers?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "What kind of papers?" "I don't know, sir. I refused, and he got angry. That was the last I saw of him alive." Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. "You have done well to speak, mademoiselle. Rest now. Your truth has helped more than you know." As Molly left, Poirot turned to the safe, his mind racing. The passage, the whispers, the safe, it all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than a single murder. He summoned Mr. Pennington, who arrived with a tray of tea, his hand still trembling. "Monsieur Pennington," Poirot said, "this manor, it has many secrets. Tell me, have you ever heard of this passage or this safe?" The butler shook his head. "Never, sir. I've served here 20 years, and I thought I knew every nook. But this place, it's older than it seems. Lady Eleanor's grandfather built it, and he was a queer sort, always tinkering with hidden rooms." Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes distant. "A queer sort, you say? And did Monsieur Crane show interest in such things?" Pennington frowned. "Now you mention it, sir, he did ask about the manor's history, about old plans or blueprints. I thought he was just curious, being a guest." "Curious," Poirot repeated, setting down his cup. "Man, Monsieur Crane was not a man for idle curiosity. He sought something specific. Perhaps this safe holds the answer." By midday, Poirot had enlisted Dr. Hargreaves, whose scientific mind he respected, to examine the safe. The doctor, adjusting his spectacles, studied the dial. "It's a modern design," he said. "3 numbers, likely, but without the combination, it's impregnable." Poirot smiled faintly. "Impregnable, perhaps to force, but to the mind, nothing is so. Tell me, doctor, what do you know of Monsieur Crane's health?" Hargreaves blinked, surprised. His health, he was fit, for a man his age. Heart trouble perhaps, but nothing serious. "Why do you ask?" "Because Poirot said, the method of murder, it is often a reflection of the victim's life. If we understand Monsieur Crane, we understand his killer." The day passed in quiet investigation. Poirot examined the passage again, noting its proximity to the servants' quarters and the library's rear wall. He questioned each guest about their movements the night of the ball, cross-referencing their stories. Miss Evelyn Crane admitted to arguing with her brother about the will, but her tears seemed genuine. Mr. Voss, gruff and defensive, claimed he was drunk and asleep. Mrs. Langley, ever sharp, hinted at Clara Beaumont's jealousy over Crane's attentions to another woman as evening fell. Poirot gathered the household in the library once more. The safe loomed in their minds, a silent challenge. "Mies Amos," he said, his voice steady. The whispers Mademoiselle Molly heard were no illusion. They were a fragment of a plan to conceal the truth of Monsieur Crane's death. "This safe, it holds a key not to the murder itself, but to the motive. Tomorrow, we shall open it, with or without the combination." Lady Eleanor, her composure restored, spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, how can you be so certain? What if the safe is empty?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Empty, madame. Non. A safe so hidden is never empty. It holds the shadow of which the note spoke. And Hercule Poirot, he does not rest until the shadow is brought to light." The guests dispersed, their relief tempered by anticipation. Poirot remained in the library, his lantern casting a soft glow. He traced the runes on the passage walls, his mind weaving connections. The whispers, the safe, Molly's secret, they were pieces of a puzzle, each distinct yet part of a whole. As the clock struck midnight once more, Poirot smiled. The truth, he knew, was closer than ever, waiting in the shadows of Ashford Manor. Chapter 4. The Poisoned Chalice. The dining room of Ashford Manor gleamed with the somber elegance of a bygone era. Its long mahogany table, polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflected the flickering light of a chandelier dripping with crystal prisms. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and the faint tang of old wine, but beneath the opulence lay a tension as taut as a violin string. Hercule Poirot, his small, precise frame seated at the head of the table, surveyed the room with the keen eye of a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. The guests, 7 in number, sat in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of suppressed emotions: guilt, fear, defiance, and something less definable. Something Poirot's little gray cells were already cataloging. It was the morning after the maid's unsettling revelation in the hidden passage, and the household was still reeling from the knowledge that Victor Crane, the ruthless financier, whose death had brought Poirot to this fog-draped estate had been the target of a whispered plot. The discovery of the locked safe in the passage had only deepened the mystery, its contents tantalizingly out of reach without the combination. But now, a new thread had emerged, one that promised to tug the entire tapestry of the case into sharper focus. The butler, Mr. Reginald Hawthorne, stood by the sideboard, his hands trembling as he poured coffee into delicate porcelain cups. His face, usually a mask of professional neutrality, was pale, his eyes darting nervously toward port. The detective had summoned the household to the dining room under the pretense of discussing the previous night's events. But his true purpose was to observe, to probe, to unsettle. He had a way of making silence itself an interrogator, and the guests were beginning to feel its weight. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice soft yet commanding, cutting through the clink of silverware and the rustle of napkins. It is time, I think, to address a matter most grave. Monsieur Hawthorne, you have something to share. Nest ce pas. The butler froze, the coffee pot tilting dangerously in his hands. A murmur rippled through the guest lady. Eleanor Ashford, the poised yet anxious hostess. Her nephew, Charles Ashford, a brooding young man with a gambler's restless energy. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, the jilted lover whose eyes still burned with resentment. Mr. Harold Grayson, the cheated business partner with a clenched jaw. Miss Clara Crane, Victor's vengeful sister, whose delicate hands twisted a handkerchief into knots. Dr. Felix Mortimer, the family physician with a too-smooth demeanor, and Miss Evelyn Ward, the quiet governess whose gaze flickered with secrets. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Poirot, Hawthorne stammered, setting the pot down with a clatter. His voice was high, strained, like a man caught in a lie. He hadn't yet prepared. Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. Come, Monsieur Hawthorne. You are a man of precision, a butler of impeccable service. Yet this morning, your hands shake, your eyes avoid mine. There is something you know, something about the night Monsieur Crane died. Speak, and let us proceed with clarity. The room held its breath. Hawthorne's shoulders sagged, and he wiped his brow with a trembling hand. It's the wine, sir, he whispered. The glass Monsieur Crane drank from that night it had traces of something. A poison, I think. A collective gasp erupted. Clara Crane's handkerchief fell to the table, and Charles Ashford's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her throat, her emerald ring catching the light. Poison, she whispered. In my house. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Precise thing, monsieur. Hawthorne, you will explain. When did you discover this, and how? Hawthorne swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. After the dinner, sir, when I was clearing the table, I noticed Monsieur Crane's glass. It had a faint residue, a cloudy film. I've seen such things before, in my years of service. My father was a chemist, you see, and he taught me to recognize certain substances. I believe it was aconite, deadly, fast-melting. I didn't say anything at first because I was afraid of what it meant. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you kept this glass. You preserved it for inspection. Yes, sir, Hawthorne said, his voice steadier now. It's in the pantry, locked in a cupboard. I didn't touch it after I saw the residue. Bon. You have done well, Monsieur Hawthorne, though you should have spoken sooner. Poirot turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping over them like a searchlight. This revelation, it changes much. We must now reconstruct the dinner, the moment when Monsieur Crane drank from this poisoned chalice, who poured the wine, who handled the glass, who had the opportunity to administer this. Aconite. The word hung in the air, sharp and cold. Mrs. Langley's face flushed, and she leaned forward, her voice cutting. Are you suggesting one of us poisoned, Victor? That's absurd. We were all at the table, all drinking the same wine. Not so, Madame Langley, Poirot said smoothly. The wine, it comes from a decanter. But the glass of Monsieur Crane, it is unique. The poison was in his glass alone, not the decanter. This is a matter of precision, of intent. Dr. Mortimer cleared his throat, his voice measured, but tinged with unease. Aconite, you say? That's a rare poison, Mr. Poirot. It's not something one simply stumbles upon. It requires knowledge, access to certain plants or compounds. Surely the butler is mistaken. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps, Doctor... But let us not dismiss Monsieur Hawthorne's observation so quickly. We shall examine the glass, and then we shall see. Poirot dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain in the drawing room, while he and Hawthorne retrieved the glass. The pantry was a small, orderly space, its shelves lined with jars of preserves and neatly stacked china. Hawthorne unlocked a cupboard and produced a crystal wineglass, its stem delicate, its bowl faintly clouded with a residue that shimmered in the dim light. Poirot held it up, turning it slowly. Aconite, you say? A poison most subtle, most deadly. It mimics the symptoms of a heart attack, does it not? The rapid pulse, the collapse, the sudden death. Yet Monsieur Crane's death, it was ruled a heart attack by you, Dr. Mortimer, was it not? The doctor, who had followed them into the pantry, stiffened. I examined him myself, Mr. Poirot. His symptoms were consistent with cardiac failure. I saw no reason to suspect poison. And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft as silk, the glass tells a different story. We shall have it tested, but, for now, let us return to the dining room. I wish to reconstruct the evening of the dinner, to see where the truth lies. Back in the dining room, Poirot arranged the guests around the table as they had been on the night of Crane's death. He placed himself at Crane's seat, the head of the table, and directed Hawthorne to reenact the serving of the wine. The butler, still pale, moved with mechanical precision, pouring from an imaginary decanter into each guest's glass. Stop, Poirot said, as Hawthorne reached Charles Ashford's place. You poured for Monsieur Ashford, then for Monsieur Crane. We, in that order. Yes, sir, Hawthorne said. I always serve from the left, moving clockwise, and the decanter, it remained in your hands. Yes, sir, I never set it down. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. Then the poison, it was not in the decanter. It was in the glass before the wine was poured. Tell me, who had access to Monsieur Crane's glass before dinner? The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Eleanor spoke first, her voice trembling. The glasses were set out by the staff, but anyone could have touched them. We were all in and out of the dining room that evening, preparing for the masquerade ball. Precisement, Poirot said. And the masquerade ball, it was a chaos of movement, of masks, of hidden identities. A perfect moment for a subtle act, a sleight of hand. But let us focus on the dinner itself. Monsieur Hawthorne, you served the wine, but did anyone else approach Monsieur Crane's glass during the meal? Hawthorne frowned, his brow furrowing. I don't recall, sir. It was a busy night, with the ball preparations. I was distracted, ensuring everything was in order. Poirot turned to the guests. And you, Mies Amos, did you see anything unusual? A hand near Monsieur Crane's glass, a moment when attention was diverted. Silence fell, thick and oppressive. Then Miss Clara Crane, her voice low and bitter, spoke. Victor was arguing with Harold Grayson during the dinner. They were loud, heated. Everyone was watching them. If someone wanted to tamper with his glass, that would have been the moment. Grayson's face reddened. Are you accusing me, Clara? I had no love for Victor, but I didn't poison him. I was too busy trying to keep my temper in check. Poirot raised a hand. Peace, Monsieur Grayson. Mademoiselle Crane merely observes a moment of distraction. Let us explore it. Describe this argument. Grayson shifted uncomfortably. Victor was gloating about a deal we'd made years ago. He cheated me out of a fortune, and he had the gall to bring it up at dinner, in front of everyone. I lost my temper. Yes, but I didn't touch his damned glass. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And during this argument, where was everyone's attention? On them, Mrs. Langley said sharply. Victor was insufferable, taunting Harold. We were all watching, trying to avoid a scene. Except Miss Evelyn Ward said softly, her voice almost lost in the room's tension. I wasn't. I was looking at my plate. I didn't want to get involved. Poirot's gaze snapped to her. Mademoiselle Ward, you are most interesting. You did not watch the argument. What, then, did you see? The governess hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. I saw someone move near Victor's place. It was quick, just a shadow of movement. I thought it was nothing, just someone adjusting their napkin or reaching for a glass. But now, Poirot prompted, his voice gentle but insistent. Now I'm not sure, she whispered. It could have been someone tampering with his glass. The room erupted in murmurs, accusations flickering like sparks. Poirot silenced them with a sharp gesture. Enough, Mademoiselle Ward. You will describe this shadow. Was it a man? A woman? Tall, short, quick, deliberate. Evelyn's eyes widened, her face pale. I don't know. It was too quick. I only saw a hand, I think. A gloved hand, maybe, from the ball preparations. Everyone was still in costume. You see, Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A gloved hand. Most interesting. The masquerade ball, it seems, provided not only distraction, but disguise. We must consider this carefully. Poirot dismissed the guests once more, asking them to remain in the manor while he examined the dining room alone. He paced the length of the table, his small, polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. He stopped at Crane's place, studying the chair, the tablecloth, the placement of the cutlery. His fingers traced the edge of the table, pausing at a faint scratch, barely visible in the polished surface. Aha, he murmured. A clue, perhaps. He knelt, peering beneath the table, and found a tiny shard of glass, no larger than a grain of rice, embedded in the carpet. He extracted it with a pair of tweezers from his pocket, holding it to the light. It sparkled, its edges sharp, as if it had broken off from something larger. Poirot straightened, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The shard was too small to be from a wineglass, but it suggested something had been broken or tampered with near Crane's place. He pocketed the shard and returned to the pantry, where he examined the poisoned glass again. The residue was faint, but unmistakable. Aconite, as Hawthorne had suspected, was a poison that required precision and knowledge. It was not a crime of impulse, but of calculation. Returning to the dining room, Poirot summoned Dr. Mortimer. The physician entered, his expression wary. You wished to see me, Mr. Poirot. Oui, doctor, you are a man of science, a man familiar with poisons. N'est-ce pas? Tell me, how would one obtain aconite in a place like Ashford Manor? Mortimer frowned. Aconite is derived from the monkshood plant. It's rare, but not impossible to find. A skilled botanist or chemist could extract it. There's a greenhouse on the estate Lady Eleanor's pride and joy. She grows all manner of plants there, though I doubt she'd know the dangerous ones. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A greenhouse, you say, most interesting. And you, as a physician, would recognize such a plant. Of course, Mortimer said, a touch too quickly. But I had no reason to tamper with Victor's glass. My examination was thorough, and I stand by my conclusion of a heart attack. Yet the glass suggests otherwise, Poirot said. Tell me, doctor, where were you during the argument between Monsieur Crane and Monsieur Grayson? Mortimer hesitated. I was at the table, like everyone else. I tried to calm things down, but Victor was in one of his moods. I didn't touch his glass, if that's what you're implying. Poirot smiled faintly. I imply nothing, doctor. I merely observe. You may go. Poirot made his way to the greenhouse, a glass structure nestled in the manor's gardens, its panes fogged with condensation. Inside, the air was humid, thick with the scent of earth and blooms. Lady Eleanor was there, tending to a row of vibrant orchids, her hands deft despite the strain in her face. Mr. Poirot, she said, looking up. What brings you here? The pursuit of truth, madame, he said, bowing slightly. I am told you are a lover of plants. Tell me, do you grow monkshood in this greenhouse? Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Monkshood? Yes, I have some. It's a beautiful plant, but I know it's dangerous. I keep it locked in a separate section, away from the staff. Why do you ask? Poirot's mustache twitched. A suspicion, nothing more. May I see this section? Lady Eleanor led him to a small locked door at the back of the greenhouse. She produced a key and opened it, revealing a collection of plants with dark, hooded flowers. "Monkshood," she said. "I grow it for its beauty, but I'm careful. No one else has access to this area." "No one?" Poirot asked, his tone mild but probing. "No one," she said firmly. "The key is always with me." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the plants. One stem was slightly shorter than the others, its leaves clipped. "Curious," he murmured. "A small harvest, perhaps." Lady Eleanor paled. "I haven't touched it, Mr. Poirot. I swear it." "I believe you, madame," he said. "But someone has. And that someone, they knew what they were doing." Back in the manor, Poirot gathered his thoughts. The poisoned glass, the gloved hand, the clipped monk's hood, the shard of glass, they were pieces of a puzzle, each fitting into the next. He returned to the dining room, where he found Miss Evelyn Ward lingering by the window, her face pale. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "you are troubled. There is something more you wish to say." "We." She bit her lip, her eyes darting to the door. I didn't tell the whole truth earlier. During the argument, I saw more than a hand. I saw a vial, a small glass vial, in someone's hand. It was quick, but I'm sure of it. They poured something into Victor's glass." Poirot's heart quickened, but his face remained calm. "A vial, you say, and this person, they were gloved." "Yes," she whispered. "A black glove, like the ones we wore for the ball. I couldn't see their face." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "You have done well, mademoiselle. This vial, it is the key. But tell me, why did you not speak of this before?" "I was afraid," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to be involved. Victor, he wasn't a good man. Whoever did this, they had their reasons." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Reasons, mademoiselle, do not justify murder. But fear not. Hercule Poirot will protect you, and the truth, it will be found." That evening, Poirot gathered the guests once more, his demeanor calm but resolute. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "the poison in Monsieur Crane's glass was a distraction, a clever ruse. Aconite, it is deadly, but it was not the cause of his death. The residue in the glass, it was too faint, too deliberate. Someone wished us to believe in poison, to divert our attention from the true method of murder." The guests gasped, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. Charles Ashford leaned forward, his voice sharp. "If not poison, then what killed him?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, monsieur, is a question for another day. But rest assured, the truth lies not in the glass, but in the shadows. The poison, it was a performance, a sleight of hand to mislead us. The real method, it is more subtle, more cunning." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Tonight, you will sleep, and tomorrow, we will continue. But know this, Hercule Poirot sees all, and the killer, they cannot hide forever." The chapter closed with the guests dispersing, their relief tempered by unease. The poison had been a false trail, but Poirot's insight had shifted the investigation's direction, bringing him closer to the heart of the mystery. The dining room, now empty, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next revelation in the lethal puzzle of Ashford Manor. Chapter 5. The shadow in the garden. The Yorkshire moors, cloaked in a dense swirling fog, seemed to whisper secrets to Hercule Poirot as he stepped into the gardens of Ashford Manor. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and fading roses, and the morning light struggled to pierce the mist that enveloped the estate. Poirot, his impeccable suit a defiant contrast to the wild landscape, adjusted his hat and surveyed the sprawling grounds. Victor Crane, the ruthless financier whose death had summoned Poirot to this isolated manor, had been seen here last, alive and restless, drawn to the gardens each evening as if tethered to some unseen force. Somewhere among these tangled hedges and ancient trees lay a clue to the locked room mystery that had shaken the household. The previous day's discoveries had sharpened Poirot's focus. The rare poison found in Crane's wineglass, as revealed by the trembling butler, was a clever misdirection. not the cause of death. Poirot had kept this insight to himself, allowing the guests 7 in number, each with a motive to despise Crane, to believe the investigation was still centered on the dining room. But his little gray cells had turned outward, to the gardens where Crane's nightly ritual had unfolded. The groundskeeper, Amos Rudd, a man as weathered as the moors themselves, had spoken of Crane's habit of lingering near an ancient oak, his voice low and his manner secretive. It was here, Poirot sensed, that the truth might begin to emerge. "Ami," Poirot murmured, his breath forming a faint cloud in the chill air. "The garden, it is not merely a place of beauty, it is a canvas of secrets, painted in shadows." He followed the gravel path, his polished shoes crunching softly, toward the oak that stood like a sentinel at the garden's heart. The garden was a labyrinth of contrasts. Manicured lawns gave way to wild brambles, and orderly paths twisted into overgrown thickets. The ancient oak loomed ahead, its gnarled branches clawing at the fog like fingers reaching for answers. Surrounding its base was a circle of moss-covered stones, arranged with an almost ceremonial precision. Poirot paused, his gloved hand brushing the rough bark. "What did you seek here, Monsieur Crane?" he mused aloud. "What compelled you to return, night after night?" He knelt, his keen eyes scanning the earth. The soil beneath the oak was disturbed, recently turned, as though someone had dug and hastily covered their work. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Beans, sir. The ground. It speaks when men fall silent." From his coat pocket, he produced a small trowel, a tool he carried for such moments, and began to dig with careful precision. The earth yielded easily, and within moments, the trowel struck something solid. Brushing away the dirt, Poirot uncovered a tarnished silver locket, its surface etched with delicate filigree. He opened it with a gentle click. Inside lay a lock of dark hair, tied with a faded ribbon, and a slip of paper bearing a cryptic inscription, S12, V9, L4. Poirot turned the paper over, but it offered no further clues. The locket's weight felt heavy with meaning, a tangible relic of Crane's final days. He slipped it into his pocket, his mind already weaving connections. Was this a token of love, a mark of guilt, or a clue to a deeper betrayal? A rustling in the nearby hedges broke his reverie. Poirot turned sharply, his mustache twitching with alertness. "Who is there?" he called, his voice calm but authoritative. The rustling stopped, and silence hung heavy in the fog. Then, from the mist, emerged Amos Rudd, his weathered face taut with unease, clutching a pair of pruning shears. "Begging your pardon, sir," Amos said, his voice rough as the moors. "Didn't mean to startle you. Just trimming the hedges." "Been at something fierce." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his smile remained courteous. "Monsieur Rudd, it is most curious, is it not, that you appear at the precise moment I uncover a treasure beneath this oak? Perhaps you can enlighten Hercule Poirot as to its significance." Amos's gaze flickered to the disturbed earth, his hands tightening on the shears. "I don't know nothing about no treasure, sir. I tend the grounds, that's all. Mr. Crane, he was always out here, muttering to himself, called this his place of peace, though he looked more haunted than peaceful." "And what did he say, this Monsieur Crane, in his mutterings?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but insistent. Amos shifted, his eyes darting toward the manor. "Hard to catch, sir. Something about debts repaid and shadows rising. I didn't think much of it. Rich folks say odd things." Poirot nodded, storing the phrases in his mind. "Mercy, Monsieur Rudd. You have been most helpful. Continue your work. I wish to reflect here, alone." Amos tipped his cap and shuffled off, casting a wary glance back. Poirot watched him disappear into the fog, his thoughts turning to the groundskeeper's words. Debts repaid, shadows rising. They echoed the note found in Crane's hand. The truth lies in the shadow. The oak, it seemed, was more than a tree, it was a keeper of secrets. Poirot ventured deeper into the garden, where the fog thickened, cloaking the world in an ethereal haze. The path led to a crumbling stone fountain, its basin filled with leaves and stagnant water. According to the maid, Crane had lingered here as well, his silhouette a familiar sight in the twilight. Poirot examined the fountain, noting a faint scratch on its rim, as though a metal object had been dragged across it. He traced the mark, his thoughts interrupted by approaching footsteps. It was Clara Henshaw, the governess, her pale face framed by a dark bonnet. She froze upon seeing Poirot, her hands clutching a basket of herbs. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice quivering. "I didn't expect to find you here. And yet, mademoiselle, here I am," Poirot replied, his tone warm but probing. "You gather herbs in this fog, at such an hour. A curious choice, n'est-ce pas?" Clara's cheeks flushed. "I find it soothing. The children are with their tutor, and I needed to clear my head after everything." Poirot tilted his head, studying her. Clara was the least conspicuous of the guests, a quiet figure who seemed to fade into the manor's shadows. Yet her presence here, so soon after his discovery, was no accident. "Tell me, mademoiselle, did you ever see Monsieur Crane in these gardens? Near the oak, perhaps, or this fountain?" Clara's eyes widened, and she took a step back. I saw him sometimes. Yes, he walked alone. I never spoke to him." Poirot's smile was reassuring, but his gaze missed nothing. "And did you notice anything unusual? A gesture, a word, a shadow that did not belong?" Clara's fingers tightened on her basket. "I don't know what you mean, monsieur. I'm just a governess. I keep to myself." "Bien, sir, you are the governess," Poirot said, his voice softening. "But even the quietest among us see things, n'est-ce pas? If you recall anything, you will tell Hercule Poirot. Oui." Clara nodded, her lips pressed tight, and hurried away. Poirot watched her vanish into the fog, noting the tremor in her hands, the evasion in her eyes. She knew more than she admitted, but he would bide his time. The garden held further secrets, and he would uncover them methodically. By midday, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing the garden's wild beauty. Poirot returned to the oak, the locket's inscription, Estwell, V9, L4 burning in his mind. It was a code, but to what? A lock, a book, a location. He paced the stone circle, his steps precise, his thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities. The oak's roots sprawled like arteries, and he noticed a faint indentation in the soil, as though something heavy had been placed there repeatedly. Kneeling, he brushed away leaves to reveal a flat stone, etched with a single word, redemption. Poirot's pulse quickened. Mon Dieu, the pieces, they align. He pressed a stone, but it did not move. Noticing a groove around its edge, he pried it up, revealing a shallow compartment containing a leather journal. Its pages were yellowed, but Crane's precise handwriting was clear. The entries detailed a scandal from 20 years ago, when Crane had ruined a business partner, Samuel Vane, through fraud. Vane's family was left destitute, and his daughter, Lily, vanished. The final entry, dated the night of Crane's death, read, "The shadow returns. I cannot escape her." Poirot closed the journal, his mind racing. The locket's inscription S12 V9 L4 was no longer a mystery. It referred to Samuel, Victor, and Lily, their ages at the time of the scandal. Lily Vane, the missing daughter, was the shadow Crane feared. Was she among the guests, hiding in plain sight? That afternoon, Poirot gathered the guests in the conservatory, its glass walls offering a view of the fog-shrouded gardens. The air was thick with tension, the guests exchanging wary glances as Poirot stood before them, the locket in his hand. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice steady, "the garden of Ashford Manor is a place of secrets. This locket, buried beneath the ancient oak, speaks of a scandal that has festered for 20 years. Monsieur Crane knew of it, and it haunted him until his death." He held up the journal. "This tells of Samuel Vane, ruined by Crane, and his daughter, Lily, who vanished. The locket's inscription points to her. I ask, who knows of Lily Vane?" Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of a clock. Then, Clara Henshaw stood, her voice resolute. "I am Lily Vane." Gasps echoed through the room. Poirot's eyes gleamed, though his expression remained calm. "Mademoiselle, you have hidden well. Why reveal yourself now?" I'm tired of hiding, Clarice said. I came to confront Crane, to make him face what he did. But I swear, I did not kill him. Poirot nodded. Merci, Mademoiselle Vane. Your courage brings us closer to the truth. The scandal is the heart of this mystery, but the killer remains among us. Hercule Poirot will find them. The chapter closed with the guests in awe, their hostility softened by Poirot's promise. Lily's revelation had shifted the dynamics, but the killer's shadow lingered, and Poirot's work was far from done. Chapter 6. The clock that stopped the Yorkshire moors, cloaked in their eternal mist, seemed to press closer to Ashford Manor as night deepened. The grand estate, with its ivy-clad walls and towering gables, stood like a sentinel against a creeping fog. Yet, within its walls, an unease simmered. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive detective with a mind as sharp as a rapier, sat in the manor's library, his eyes fixed on the grand old grandfather clock in the hall. Its hands, frozen at 11:07, had caught his attention earlier that day. A silent anomaly amidst the clamor of suspicion and secrets that swirled around the death of Victor Crane. The library was a cavern of shadows, its shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes and the air thick with the scent of aged paper. A single lamp cast a warm glow over Poirot's neat figure, his mustache impeccably trimmed, his suit as pristine as if he'd just stepped from a tailor's shop. He leaned back in the high-back chair, his fingers steepled, his little gray cells humming with the puzzle before him. The clock's stillness was no mere mechanical failure. It was a clue, deliberate and brazen, woven into the fabric of this intricate murder. Victor Crane, the ruthless financier whose death had drawn Poirot to this remote manor, had been found, lifeless in the observatory, his body slumped over a telescope as if stargazing in his final moments. The coroner had declared it a heart attack, but Poirot's instincts rebelled against such simplicity. The cryptic note in Crane's hand, "The truth lies in the shadow," and the torn photograph from Chapter 2 hinted at deeper machinations. Now, this stopped clock, its pendulum stilled, whispered of tampering, of a timeline manipulated to obscure the truth. Poirot rose, his movements precise, and crossed to the hall. The grandfather clock loomed, its mahogany casing gleaming dully in the dim light. Its face, adorned with Roman numerals, stared back like a silent witness. He examined it closely, noting the faint scratches around the keyhole where the clock's mechanism could be accessed. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "someone has taken great pains to halt the march of time." The household was restless. Lady Eleanor Ashford, the elegant but harried mistress of the manor, had retired early, her nerves frayed by the mounting tension. The 7 guests, each a suspect in Poirot's meticulous ledger, had scattered after dinner, their alibis and motives dissected over the past days. There was Clara Beaumont, the jilted lover whose fiery temper masked a wounded heart; Reginald Holt, the cheated business partner with a ledger of grudges; and Victor's sister, Margaret Crane, whose icy demeanor hid a vengeful streak. The others: Dr. Simon Fairchild, the nervous butler, Mr. Grayson, the enigmatic governess, Miss Evelyn Ward, and the reclusive groundskeeper, Mr. Dawkins. Each carried their own shadows of guilt. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft tread on the staircase. Clara Beaumont descended, her auburn hair catching the candlelight, her silk dressing gown whispering against the polished wood. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I couldn't sleep. This house, it feels like it's watching us." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes keen. "The house, mademoiselle, is but a stage. It is the actors within who hold the secrets. Tell me, what brings you here at this hour?" Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the cord of her gown. I saw something the night Victor died. I didn't mention it before, because I wasn't sure, but now." She glanced at the clock, her expression tightening. "That clock, it was ticking. When I passed it after dinner, around 10 o'clock. I'm certain of it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Certain, you say? This is most interesting. And where were you, mademoiselle?" "At 11:07, the hour this clock proclaims." Clara's cheeks flushed. "I was in my room, alone. I'd argued with Victor earlier, and I couldn't bear the company of the others." But I swear, the clock was still ticking then. Poirot nodded, filing away her words. Merci, mademoiselle. Your observation is a piece of the puzzle. Return to your rest, and fear not, Hercule Poirot shall bring order to this chaos. As Clara retreated, Poirot turned back to the clock. Her testimony suggested the clock had been stopped deliberately after 10, perhaps to mislead about the time of Crane's death. But why 11:07? It was too precise to be arbitrary. He resolved to examine the clock's mechanism at first light, but for now, he needed to test the alibis of those who had been near the hall that night. The next morning, Poirot gathered the household in the dining room, its long oak table gleaming under a chandelier that seemed to mock the somber mood. The guests sat uneasily, their eyes darting between Poirot and each other. Lady Eleanor, at the head, clasped her hands tightly. Monsieur Poirot, have you made progress? This uncertainty is unbearable. Poirot stood, his presence commanding despite his small stature. Mesdames et messieurs, the death of Monsieur Crane is no accident, nor is it a simple heart attack. The clock in the hall, stopped at 11:07, is a deliberate act to obscure the true hour of his demise. I ask now, who among you was in the hall after 10 o'clock, when Mademoiselle Beaumont assures me the clock still ticked? A murmur rippled through the room. Reginald Holt, his face ruddy from years of brandy, spoke first. I was in the billiard room with Dr. Fairchild until nearly midnight. We played a few frames, then retired. The clock was ticking when we passed it around 10:30. Dr. Fairchild nodded, his spectacles glinting. Quite so. I recall checking my pocket watch. It was in sync with the grandfather clock. Poirot's gaze shifted to Margaret Crane, whose steely eyes met his without flinching. I was in the conservatory, reading, she said. I heard the clock chime 10, but I didn't pass it afterward. The butler, Mr. Grayson, fidgeted. I was tending to the fires, sir. I passed the hall several times, but I didn't notice the clock's state. My duties kept me busy. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Grayson's nervous demeanor had not escaped him. And you, Monsieur Dawkins? He asked, turning to the groundskeeper, whose weathered face betrayed little. Dawkins shrugged. I was outside, checking the stables. Didn't come in till after midnight. Miss Evelyn Ward, the governess, spoke softly. I was with Lady Eleanor's children, reading them a story. I didn't leave their room until 11. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. And yet, someone stopped the clock at 11:07. This act was not random. It was a calculated move to confuse the timeline of Monsieur Crane's death. I propose we examine the clock together, ascertain who tampered with it. Poirot's suggestion was met with reluctant agreement. The household followed him to the hall, where he opened the clock's casing with a small key provided by Lady Eleanor. Inside, he found the pendulum's weight detached, its pin bent deliberately. Voila, he said softly. The sabotage is clear. He turned to the group. This confirms my suspicion. The clock was stopped to suggest Monsieur Crane died later than he did. But why? To protect someone's alibi, perhaps. A gasp came from Clara. You mean someone wanted us to think Victor was alive longer? Precisement, Poirot replied. Let us return to your movements. Monsieur Holt, you claim you were with Dr. Fairchild until midnight. Yet the billiard room is adjacent to the hall. Did you, perhaps, step out briefly? Holt bristled. Are you accusing me, Poirot? I told you, I was with Fairchild. Dr. Fairchild adjusted his spectacles. Well, there was a moment when Reginald went to fetch a drink. Around 11, perhaps. Holt's face reddened. A drink. Not to tamper with clocks. Poirot raised a hand. Calm, monsieur. I seek only the truth. Let us explore further. He led the group to the observatory, reconstructing the night of the murder. Crane had been seen in the garden at 9, arguing with a masked figure during the masquerade ball, as revealed in Chapter 8. By 10, he was in the dining room, and by 11, he was in the observatory. Poirot suspected the true time of death was closer to 10:30, before the clock was stopped. Back in the library, Poirot sat with a cup of tisane, pondering. The stopped clock pointed to someone with access to the hall and a motive to shift. The timeline. Grayson's nervous demeanor and frequent presence in the hall made him a candidate, but his motive was unclear. Holt's brief absence from the billiard room was suspicious, especially given his financial disputes with Crane. Poirot summoned Holt privately. "Monsieur Holt, your rivalry with Monsieur Crane was bitter. A falsified time of death could protect you by aligning with your alibi. Speak plainly, did you stop the clock?" Holt's fists clenched. "I despised Victor. Yes, he ruined me with his schemes. That night, we argued in the garden. He threatened to expose my debts. I followed him to the observatory, but I swear, I only meant to talk. He was alive when I left him at 10:30. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and the clock. Holt's shoulders sagged. "I stopped it, not to kill him, but to muddy the waters. I knew suspicion would fall on me. I thought if the time of death seemed later, my alibi with Fairchild would hold." Poirot nodded. "Your confession clarifies much, but it does not make you the killer. The poison in the wine glass, as we learned in Chapter 4, was a distraction. The true method of murder lies elsewhere." He dismissed Holt, who left shaken but relieved. Poirot addressed the household. "Mise amiss. The clock's deception has been unraveled. Monsieur Holt acted out of fear, not guilt. The true killer used this to their advantage, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily misled. We are closer to the truth." The guests exchanged wary glances, reassured by Poirot's calm authority, yet aware the killer remained among them. The fog outside thickened, but within Ashford Manor, the haze of deception was beginning to clear. Chapter 7. The Vanishing Wolf. The late afternoon sun cast long, amber shadows across the polished oak floors of Ashford Manor, painting the grand hall in hues of gold and melancholy. Hercule Poirot stood by the tall, arched window, his small, precise hands clasped behind his back, his sharp eyes scanning the room with a quiet intensity. The air was thick with the scent of old books and wax polish, but beneath the surface of this stately calm, a restless unease stirred among the guests. The death of Victor Crane, the ruthless financier whose locked-room demise had summoned Poirot to this secluded Yorkshire estate, had unraveled the fragile civility of the household. Each revelation, each clue, meticulously uncovered by Poirot's little gray cells, had tightened the noose of suspicion around the 7 guests, and now a new thread in the mystery demanded his attention: the vanishing of Crane's will. Lady Eleanor Ashford, the Manor's elegant yet beleaguered mistress, stood near the fireplace, her delicate fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Her pale face, framed by silver-streaked hair, betrayed a weariness that went beyond mere grief. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low but steady, "I must speak with you privately. It is a matter of utmost urgency." Poirot turned, his mustache twitching slightly as he offered a courteous nod. "Mais oui, Lady Ashford, I am at your disposal. Shall we retire to the study?" The study, a small room lined with mahogany bookshelves and a single, heavy desk, offered a reprieve from the prying eyes of the other guests. Lady Eleanor closed the door behind them, her movements brisk but tinged with hesitation. She sank into a leather chair, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a mixture of resolve and dread. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, "Victor's will has disappeared. It was kept in a locked drawer in his private study, a room only he and I had access to. I checked this morning, after your questions about his financial dealings stirred my suspicions. The drawer was forced open, and the will is gone." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his head tilting slightly as he absorbed the information. "This is most interesting, Lady Ashford. A will, you say, a document of great consequence, no doubt. Tell me, what were its contents, and who stood to benefit?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window, where the moor stretched endlessly into the mist. "Victor was a man of complicated affairs. His will, as I last saw it, disinherited several of the guests here. His sister, Clara, was to receive nothing, due to a falling out years ago. His business partner, Mr. Reginald Holt, was also excluded, as Victor believed he had been embezzling funds. The bulk of his estate was to go to a charitable trust, with a small portion reserved for someone else. A person whose identity he never fully disclosed to me. Poirot's eyebrows arched. A secret heir, perhaps. This is most intriguing. And you say the drawer was forced open. No sign of the will itself. None, she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Only the broken lock and an empty folder where it should have been. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly against the floor. The theft of a will suggests a motive, most personal. Someone in this house believes their future depends upon its contents or its absence. We must search, Lady Ashford, and we must do so with discretion. The search began in Victor Crane's private study, a room that seemed to hold the weight of the man's ambitions. The desk, a hulking piece of ebony, dominated the space, its surface cluttered with ledgers, fountain pens, and a silver inkstand. Poirot's keen eyes swept over every detail, from the faint scratches on the drawer's lock to the faint scent of tobacco lingering in the air. He knelt to examine the drawer, his fingers tracing the splintered wood where the lock had been pried open. A clumsy effort, he murmured. The thief was in haste, or perhaps lacked the finesse for subtlety. But why take only the will? There are papers here of value contracts, deeds yet they remain untouched. Captain Hastings, Poirot's loyal companion, stood by the door, his earnest face creased with concern. It's a bold move, Poirot. Whoever took it must have known it would be missed. Do you think it's still in the house? Poirot straightened, brushing a speck of dust from his immaculate suit. Mon ami, a document of such importance is not easily destroyed. It is hidden, I am certain, and we shall find it. But first, we must understand why it was taken. The will, it seems, is a key to the heart of this mystery. He turned to Lady Eleanor, who hovered nearby, her hands clasped tightly. You mentioned a secret heir. Did Victor ever speak of this person? A name, perhaps, or a clue to their identity? She shook her head. He was cagey, even with me. He said only that the heir was someone from his past, someone wronged by his actions. I assumed it was a distant relative, perhaps a child from a liaison he kept hidden. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. A child, you say? Or, perhaps, a ward, a protege. The possibilities multiply. We must search Crane's room for any trace of this errand, for the will itself. The search of Victor Crane's bedroom was a meticulous affair, conducted with the precision that only Poirot could muster. The room was austere, its furnishings reflecting the man's disciplined nature. A narrow bed, a wardrobe of tailored suits, and a small writing desk by the window. Hastings rifled through drawers, while Poirot examined the room's less obvious corners, a loose floorboard, the underside of a chair, the frame of a mirror. It was beneath the writing desk, in a cleverly concealed compartment, that Poirot found his first clue, a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a partial draft of the will. The document was incomplete, ending mid-fitness, but its contents were explosive. Regard us, Hastings, Poirot said, holding the paper to the light. This draft names the charitable trust, as Lady Eleanor described, but it also mentions a bequest to E.V., a person whose full name is not given. The sum is substantial, and the language suggests a deep sense of obligation. This E.V. is our secret heir, I am certain. Hastings peered over Poirot's shoulder. But who is E.V., and why is this only a draft? Where's the rest of it? Poirot tapped his temple. The draft was hidden, mon ami, because it was a work in progress. Crane, perhaps, was still deciding the fate of his fortune. The final will, the one that was stolen, must contain the full truth, and someone in this house did not wish that truth to be known. Lady Eleanor, who had joined them, gasped softly, E.V. I don't know anyone by those initials. Could it be a code, Monsieur Poirot? Perhaps, Poirot replied, his voice thoughtful. But initials are rarely arbitrary. They are a signature of identity, a breadcrumb, leading us to the truth. We must question the guests again, with this new knowledge in mind. The drawing room was a tableau of tension, as Poirot gathered the 7 guests. Clara Crane, Victor's, the strange sister, sat rigidly, her lips pursed in disapproval. Reginald Holt, the business partner, fidgeted with his cufflinks, his eyes darting nervously. The jilted lover, Miss Vivian Lyle, toyed with a strand of pearls, her gaze distant. The vengeful sibling, Edward Crane, leaned against the mantelpiece, his face a mask of barely contained anger. The quiet governess, Miss Margaret Poole, sat with her hands folded, her eyes downcast. The butler, Mr. Dawkins, hovered near the door, his nervous demeanor betraying his unease. And the groundskeeper, Mr. Thomas Rudd, stood awkwardly, his rough hands clasped before him. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "A new development has come to my attention. The will of Monsieur Victor Crane, a document of great importance, has been stolen from a locked drawer in his study. This act suggests that one among you seeks to alter the course of justice. I ask now, does the name E.V. mean anything to you?" A ripple of unease passed through the room. Clara's eyes narrowed, while Holt's face paled. Vivian Lyle's hand froze on her pearls, and Edward Crane's jaw tightened. Miss Poole's fingers twitched, and Dawkins coughed nervously. Only Rudd seemed unmoved, his weathered face impassive. "No one speaks," Poirot said, his tone almost playful. "Very well, let us consider the possibilities. The initials E may belong to a person known to you, or perhaps they are a code, a cipher. But I assure you, the truth will not remain hidden for long." Clara Crane spoke first, her voice sharp. "This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. My brother's will was a private matter. If it's gone, perhaps he destroyed it himself. He was always secretive." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes fixed on her, "but the broken lock suggests otherwise. A thief does not break what they can open with a key, lest they lack one. Tell me, Madame Crane, did you ever discuss the will with your brother?" Clara stiffened. "We were not on speaking terms. He cut me out years ago, after an incident. I had no interest in his money. And yet," Poirot said smoothly, "the absence of the will could restore your claim to his estate. Not a motive most compelling." Clara's face flushed, but before she could retort, Reginald Holt interjected. "This is nonsense. Victor and I had our differences, but I wouldn't stoop to theft. Besides, what's this E.V. business? Sounds like a distraction." Poirot turned to Holt, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Holt, your differences with Monsieur Crane were financial, were they not? A will that excluded you would be most inconvenient. Perhaps you sought to ensure it never saw the light of day." Holt's mouth opened, then closed, his protest dying under Poirot's scrutiny. Vivian Lyle spoke next, her voice soft but edged with defiance. "If you're accusing us all, Monsieur Poirot, you're wasting your time. I loved Victor, even after he broke my heart. I didn't need his money, and I certainly didn't steal his will." Poirot inclined his head. "Your passion is noted, Mademoiselle Lyle. But love, like hate, can drive one to desperate acts. Tell me, did Monsieur Crane ever speak of an E.V. in your presence?" Vivian hesitated, her eyes flickering. "No, not that I recall." Poirot's mustache twitched, but he said nothing, turning instead to Miss Poole. "And you, mademoiselle? You are quiet, yet I sense you observe much. Have you knowledge of this E.V.?" Miss Poole's hands tightened in her lap. I don't know anyone by those initials, sir. I was only the governess to Lady Eleanor's children. Mr. Crane rarely spoke to me." Anguished moans rose from the guests like specters, each voice a whisper of guilt, each shadow a flicker of betrayal. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a mind as sharp as a guillotine's edge, stood at the heart of Ashford Manor's drawing room, his piercing gaze sweeping over the assembled company. The disappearance of Victor Crane's will, a document that could unravel the tangled web of motives surrounding his mysterious death, had cast a new pall over the Yorkshire estate. With the discovery of a partial draft naming an enigmatic E.V. as a secret heir, investigation had taken a sharp turn into the labyrinth of human greed and deception. This was no mere puzzle. It was a lethal game, and Poirot was determined to play it to its final move. The air in the drawing room crackled with tension. The guests' faces a gallery of suppressed emotions: Clara Crane's tight-lipped resentment, Reginald Holt's nervous agitation, Vivian Lyle's fragile poise, Edward Crane's smoldering anger, Margaret Poole's quiet reserve, Dawkins the butler's anxious deference, and Thomas Rudd's stoic indifference. Poirot's announcement of the stolen will and the cryptic initials EV had stirred the pot, and now, as he questioned each in turn, the truth seemed to shimmer just beyond reach, like a mirage on the misty moors. Poirot's method was surgical, his questions precise yet deceptively gentle, designed to probe without alarming. He began with Clara, whose estrangement from her brother was no secret. "Madam Crane," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, "you claim no interest in your brother's fortune, yet the absence of his will could restore your inheritance. A tempting prospect." Clara's eyes flashed with indignation, but her voice was steady. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, Victor and I were done. I didn't need his money, and I didn't take his will. If it's gone, perhaps he burned it himself." He was paranoid enough. Poirot's mustache quivered, a silent acknowledgement of her deflection. He turned to Holt, whose financial disputes with Crane were well documented. "Monsieur Holt, a will that cut you out would be a blow, would it not? Removing it might delay, even prevent, the execution of such terms." Holt's face reddened, his cufflinks glinting as he gestured defensively. "I'm no thief, Poirot. I built my own wealth, despite Victor's accusations. This EV nonsense is just that, nonsense, a red herring." Poirot's gaze lingered, then moved to Vivian Lyle, whose beauty was marred by the shadow of rejection. "Mademoiselle Lyle, love scorned can breed desperation. Did Monsieur Crane ever mention this EV to you, perhaps in a moment of confidence?" Vivian's fingers paused on her pearls, her eyes distant. "No," she said softly. "He didn't. Victor kept his secrets close, even from me." Miss Poole, the governess, was next, her demure posture belying a keen awareness. "Mademoiselle Poole," Poirot said, "you see much, yet speak little. Have you no knowledge of this EV?" Her hands tightened, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was only the governess, sir. Mr. Crane had no reason to confide in me. The butler, Dawkins, and the groundskeeper, Rudd, offered little. More Dawkins, with nervous denials, Rudd with curt indifference. Yet Poirot sensed the truth was near, hidden in the crevices of their words, waiting for his little gray cells to pry it loose." Leaving the drawing room, Poirot returned to Crane's study, determined to uncover more. The forced drawer had yielded the partial draft, but the room held other secrets. He examined the bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines of leather-bound volumes. One book, a worn copy of The Hound of the Baskervilles, felt oddly heavy. With a gentle tug, Poirot dislodged it, revealing a slim, hidden panel. Inside was a single sheet of paper, not the will, but a letter, written in Crane's precise hand. It read, "To EV, my debt is eternal. The trust will secure your future, as I could not secure your past. Forgive me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A confession of guilt, perhaps," he murmured to Hastings, who had followed him. This EV was wronged by Crane, and the will was his atonement. But who is this person, and why steal the will unless to suppress this debt? Hastings frowned. Could it be one of the guests? Edward, perhaps. His initials fit. Poirot shook his head. "Nan, mon ami. Edward Crane's motive is revenge, not inheritance. This EV is someone else, someone outside the obvious circle, yet close enough to be named in the will." The search continued, Poirot's mind a whirl of connections. He enlisted Lady Eleanor's help, asking her to recall any obscure figures from Crane's past. She mentioned a name of Vance, a former colleague from Crane's early days in London, a woman who had vanished after a falling out. Victor never spoke of her, Lady Eleanor said, but I heard rumors of a scandal of betrayal, perhaps a child. Poirot's pulse quickened. A child. The locket from the garden, with its lock of hair, flashed in his memory. "We must find this Evelyn Vance," he said. "She, or her kin, may hold the key." The investigation took a new turn as Poirot dispatched discreet inquiries to London, seeking records of Evelyn Vance. Meanwhile, he returned to the manor, his attention drawn to the guests' interactions. At dinner, he observed subtle glances, Clara's cold stare at Holt, Vivian's fleeting look at Miss Poole, Edward's clenched fists. The tension was palpable, each guest a piece in the puzzle, yet none fitting perfectly as the thief. That night, Poirot staged a subtle trap. He let slip to Dawkins, within earshot of the others, that he had found a clue to the will's location, a lie, but one designed to provoke. By midnight, he and Hastings hid in the study, watching from the shadows. Sure enough, a figure crept in Miss Poole, her quiet demeanor replaced by a frantic search of the desk. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Mademoiselle Poole, you seek the will, do you not? But it is not here." Miss Poole froze, her eyes wide. I only wanted to know," she stammered. "I heard him speak of Evelyn once, years ago. I thought, if she was named, it might change everything." Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone remained steady. "You knew Evelyn Vance?" Miss Poole nodded, tears brimming. "She was my aunt. She died years ago, broken by Victor's betrayal. He promised her a share of his wealth, then cast her aside. I came here to learn the truth, not to steal." Poirot listened, his mind racing. Miss Poole's confession cleared her of theft but confirmed Evelyn Vance's significance. The will, he deduced, was stolen not to claim the estate, but to bury the shame of Crane's past. The thief was someone with much to lose, someone whose reputation hung on the will's silence. By dawn, Poirot's inquiries bore fruit. A solicitor in London confirmed Evelyn Vance had a daughter, Elizabeth Vance, now living quietly in a nearby village. Poirot arranged to meet her, a young woman with her mother's eyes and a guarded demeanor. She admitted Crane had contacted her months before, promising restitution. "He said the will would make things right," she said. "But I never saw it." Poirot returned to the manor, the pieces falling into place. The will was not about greed, but about control of a secret that could ruin a family's standing. In a final sweep of the manor, Poirot found the will, hidden in a hollowed-out book in Clara Crane's room. Confronted, she confessed not to murder, but to hiding the will to protect the Crane name from the scandal of Evelyn's child. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice breaking, "I couldn't let the world know Victor's shame. It would destroy us." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "The truth, madame, is not yours to bury. It belongs to those who have been wronged." Chapter 8. The Masquerade Ball. The heavy velvet drapes of Ashford Manor's grand ballroom quivered in the draught, their deep burgundy folds catching the flicker of 100 candles suspended in crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax, polished wood, and the faint floral perfume of the guests, who milled about in a kaleidoscope of silks, satins, and feathered masks. It was the evening before Victor Crane's death, and the manor had been transformed into a stage for Lady Eleanor Ashford's annual masquerade ball, a tradition as old as the manor itself, whispered to have once masked darker intrigues than mere revelry. Tonight, Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the room, his sharp eyes scanning the whirl of masked figures, his mind a crucible of deduction. The investigation into Crane's death had reached a delicate juncture. 7 days had passed since Poirot's arrival at the manor, and each day had peeled back a layer of deception, revealing motives as varied as the guests themselves. Yet the truth remained elusive, a shadow dancing just beyond his grasp. The cryptic note in Crane's hand, "The truth lies in the shadow," had haunted Poirot, its meaning tantalizingly vague. The torn photograph, the whispered plot in the hidden passage, the poisoned chalice, the buried locket, the stopped clock, and the vanished will had all pointed to a web of secrets, but none had named the killer. Now Poirot turned his attention to the night of the masquerade ball, a night when identities were cloaked and motives could have slipped through the cracks of propriety. He had learned of the ball through Lady Eleanor's meticulous journals, which detailed the event's planning with an almost obsessive precision. The guest list, the menu, the musicians all were accounted for. Yet one detail stood out. Victor Crane had been seen arguing with a masked figure in the conservatory, away from the revelry. The witness, a nervous footman named Thomas, had been reluctant to speak until Poirot's gentle probing had loosened his tongue. The argument, Thomas claimed, had been heated, though the words were muffled by the glass walls and the din of the orchestra. The masked figure had worn a black domino mask adorned with silver filigree, a costume distinctive enough to be remembered, but common enough to defy immediate identification. Poirot's task now was to unmask this figure, and he believed the key lay in recreating the night's chaos. "Messieurs et Madame," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the gathered guests. They stood in the ballroom, now stripped of its festive trappings, the chandeliers dimmed, the air heavy with anticipation. The seven suspects: Lady Eleanor's niece, Clara Ashford; the jilted lover, Margaret Langley; the cheated business partner, Reginald Holt; the vengeful sibling, Arthur Crane; the nervous butler, Mr. Gibbs; the enigmatic governess, Miss Evelyn Gray; and the groundskeeper. Mr. Harrow watched him with a mix of dread and curiosity. "Tonight, we shall reenact the masquerade ball. Each of you will don a mask, as you did that fateful night. Hercule Poirot does not believe in ghosts, but he believes in the truth, and the truth, it will reveal itself in the shadows of your movements." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Clara, her auburn hair pinned elegantly, clutched her shawl tightly. Margaret's eyes, still red from recent tears, darted toward Arthur, whose jaw was set in a grim line. Reginald adjusted his cup with a forced air of nonchalance, while Mr. Gibbs fidgeted with a tray he no longer needed to carry. Miss Gray stood apart, her serene expression unreadable, and Mr. Harrow, his weathered hands clasped, stared at the floor. Lady Eleanor, ever the gracious hostess, nodded her approval, though her pale face betrayed her anxiety. "Mr. Poirot," Clara ventured, her voice trembling slightly, "do you truly believe this charade will uncover the killer?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Mademoiselle, a charade is precisely what the killer has woven. By recreating the night, we unravel their threads. Each of you will wear a mask provided by Lady Eleanor, identical to those worn at the ball. You will move as you did, speak as you spoke, and perhaps, in doing so, betray what you concealed." The masks were distributed, each a work of art. Peacock feathers for Clara, crimson silk for Margaret, gold leaf for Reginald, raven black for Arthur, plain linen for Mr. Gibbs, ivory lace for Miss Gray, and a weathered leather one for Mr. Harrow. Poirot himself declined a mask, preferring to remain the observer, his black evening suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the colorful disguises. The musicians, hired for the reenactment, struck up a waltz, its lilting notes filling the ballroom with an eerie echo of the past. As the guests began to move, Poirot's eyes darted from one to another, noting their postures, their hesitations, their glances. The ballroom was a chessboard, and he was the Grand Master, anticipating each move. Clara glided toward the refreshment table, her peacock mask catching the light. Margaret lingered near the French doors, her crimson mask a beacon of her volatile emotions. Reginald circled the room, his gold mask gleaming with false confidence. Arthur stood rigidly by the fireplace, his black mask accentuating his brooding intensity. Mr. Gibbs hovered near the servants' entrance, his linen mask slipping slightly as he adjusted it. Miss Gray moved with quiet grace, her ivory mask a serene counterpoint to the tension. Mr. Harrow, awkward in the formal setting, kept to the edges, his leather mask blending with the shadows. Poirot's mind worked feverishly. The footman's account had placed Crane in the conservatory at approximately 10:30 p.m., arguing with the figure in the silver filigree mask. The guest list confirmed that such a mask had been provided, but Lady Eleanor's records noted only its distribution, not its wearer. Poirot had instructed the guests to recreate their movements from that night, but he had added a subtle twist. A small silver bell, identical to one found near Crane's body, was placed on a table in the ballroom, ostensibly as a decorative item. Its presence was his bait, designed to provoke a reaction. that as the waltz swelled, Poirot noticed Margaret pause by the French doors, her hand brushing the handle as if tempted to flee. He approached her, his voice low and soothing. "Mademoiselle Langley, you seem drawn to the night air. Did you, perhaps, seek it on the night of the ball?" Margaret's eyes widened behind her mask. I needed air, Mr. Poirot. It was stifling, all those people, all those secrets. I stepped onto the terrace, but I saw nothing of Victor." Poirot tilted his head, his tone gentle but probing. "Yet the terrace overlooks the conservatory. Did you not hear voices, perhaps raised in anger?" Her fingers tightened on her fan. "I heard nothing, I swear it. I was distracted." "Distracted," Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. "By whom, mademoiselle?" Before she could answer, a sharp clink echoed through the room. The silver bell had fallen from the table, rolling across the polished floor. All eyes turned to Mr. Gibbs, who stood frozen, his hand outstretched as if he had just touched it. The music faltered, and the guests stopped, their masks turning toward the butler. "Mr. Gibbs," Poirot said, his voice carrying a quiet authority, "you seem to have an affinity for this bell. Did it, perhaps, catch your eye on the night of the ball?" Gibbs's face flushed beneath his mask. I didn't mean to knock it over, sir. I was just adjusting the tablecloth." Poirot stepped forward, retrieving the bell with a delicate flourish. "A curious thing, this bell. It was found near Monsieur Crane's body, yet no one claimed it. Tell me, Mr. Gibbs, where were you at 10:30 p.m. during the ball?" Gibbs stammered, his hands trembling. "I was in the pantry, sir, preparing the midnight supper. I wasn't near the conservatory, yet the pantry is but a short walk from the conservatory." Poirot mused, his eyes never leaving Gibbs's face. "And you, monsieur, have the habit of moving silently, as a good butler must." The other guests shifted uneasily, their masks hiding their expressions, but not their tension. Clara stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Mr. Poirot, are you accusing Mr. Gibbs? He's been with our family for years." "Not accusing Mademoiselle Poirot," said, raising a hand, "merely observing. The truth, it is like a melody. It requires all the notes to be played in harmony. Let us continue." The music resumed, and the guests returned to their movements. Though the air was now charged with suspicion, Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Grey, who had remained near the ballroom's grand staircase. Her ivory mask, a serene contrast to the chaos. He approached her, his steps measured. "Mademoiselle Grey," he said, his voice soft, "you are a quiet presence, yet I suspect your eyes see much. Did you, perhaps, notice a figure in a silver filigree mask that night?" Miss Grey's lips parted slightly, her composure unbroken. "I am a governess, Mr. Poirot, trained to observe. I did see such a mask near the conservatory doors. The wearer was tall, with a hurried gait, as if they wished to avoid notice." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And did you recognize this figure, mademoiselle?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering behind her mask. "I could not be certain. The masks, you see, they obscure more than faces." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. "But the truth, it has a way of unmasking itself." He turned, abruptly, addressing the room. "Messieurs, et madame, let us now move to the conservatory. I wish to see where Monsieur Crane met his adversary." The guests followed their footsteps, echoing in the cavernous halls of the manor. The conservatory was a glass-domed marvel, filled with exotic plants and the faint hum of night insects. The air was humid, the scent of jasmine mingling with the tension. Poirot positioned the guests as Thomas had described. Crane near the central fountain, the masked figure in the shadows by the orchids. He handed a silver filigree mask to Reginald Holt, whose height matched Miss Grey's description. "Mr. Holt," Poirot said, "please don this mask and stand where the figure was seen. Let us test the scene." Holt complied, his gold mask replaced by the silver filigree. He moved to the shadows, his posture stiff. Poirot watched closely, noting the way Holt's hands clenched, the way his eyes darted toward Arthur Crane. The reenactment continued, with Poirot directing the guests to speak lines they might have overheard or spoken that night. Clara recited a polite greeting, Margaret murmured a distracted apology, and Arthur muttered something unintelligible, his voice low and bitter. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Harrow stepped forward, his leather mask askew. "I saw it too," he blurted, his voice rough. "The silver mask. I was trimming the hedges outside, and I saw someone in that mask arguing with Mr. Crane. They were pointing at something, a paper, maybe." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A paper, monsieur. This is most interesting. Did you see its contents?" Harrow shook his head. "It was too dark, and I was too far." But Mr. Crane looked angry, angrier than I ever saw him. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The paper could be the missing will, the torn photograph, or something entirely new. He turned to Holt, still in the silver mask. "Mr. Holt, you are a man of business. Did you argue with Monsieur Crane about a paper that night?" Holt's face paled beneath the mask. We discussed business, yes, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. Victor was always difficult." "Difficult," Poirot repeated, his tone sharp. "Yet you were seen in a heated exchange, in this very spot, wearing this very mask." Holt's hands rose, as if to remove the mask, but Poirot stopped him with a gesture. "Nan, monsieur, keep it on. Let us see you as you were." The other guests watched, their breaths held. Lady Eleanor, standing by the fountain, clutched her pearls. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "do you mean to say Mr. Holt is the killer?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Nan, Lady Eleanor, I mean to say that the silver filigree mask hides more than a face, it hides a motive. But whose motive? That is the question." He stepped back, addressing the group. "The night of the masquerade ball, each of you wore a mask, not only of silk or feathers, but of secrets. One of you argued with Monsieur Crane, and that argument led to his death. The silver bell, the paper, the masks, they are pieces of the puzzle. Hercule Poirot will fit them together. But for now, I ask you to reflect. Who among you wore the silver filigree mask? Who spoke with Victor Crane in the shadows?" The guests stood silent, their masks reflecting the flickering candlelight. Poirot's eyes scanned each face, searching for the telltale flicker of guilt. He had not yet named the figure in the silver mask, but he had seen enough to know they were among the 7. The chapter closed with the guests dispersing, their masks removed but their secrets intact. As Poirot returned to his study, his little gray cells alight with the certainty that the truth was near. The reenactment had been a triumph, not in unmasking the killer, but in stirring the pot of suspicion. Holt's reaction to the mask, Gibbs's fumble with the bell, Miss Gray's quiet observation, Harrow's unexpected testimony, each was a thread in the tapestry of deception. Poirot sat at his desk, a single candle illuminating the room, and jotted a note in his precise handwriting. "The silver mask is the key, but the wearer is not the killer. The killer used the mask to mislead." He smiled, satisfied that the masquerade had revealed more than the guests intended, and turned his thoughts to the next step in unraveling Agatha Christie's lethal puzzle. Chapter 9. The Letter from Beyond. The Letter from Beyond. The morning mist clung to Ashford Manor like a shroud, its tendrils curling around the ancient stone walls, as if reluctant to release the secrets they concealed. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. The guests, gathered in the drawing room over a breakfast of cold toast and tepid tea, wore expressions of strained civility, their eyes darting nervously to one another. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in his charcoal suit despite the early hour, sat apart, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his sharp green eyes scanning the room with the precision of a watchmaker. The events of the past days had frayed the nerves of even the most stoic among them. Victor Crane's death, officially declared a murder after Poirot's discovery of the tampered medication, had cast a long shadow over the manor. Each guest, from the imperious Lady Eleanor Ashford to the jittery butler, Mr. Harrow, seemed to carry a private burden of guilt or fear. Poirot, however, remained unruffled, his calm demeanor a beacon in the storm of suspicion. As the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9, a soft knock interrupted the strained silence. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, the housekeeper, entered, her face pale, and her hands trembling as she clutched a silver tray. On it lay a single envelope, sealed with crimson wax, and bearing the unmistakable monogram of Victor Crane. "Begging your pardon, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this was found this morning, tucked inside Mr. Crane's study desk. It's addressed to you." A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and took the envelope with a nod of thanks. The guests leaned forward, their curiosity piqued, though none dared speak. The wax seal cracked under Poirot's deft fingers, revealing a single sheet of paper, its ink fresh and black, as if written only hours before. He read aloud, his voice clear and measured. "To Monsieur Hercule Poirot, if you read this, I am dead, and the truth remains hidden. Beware the one who betrays with a smile, for their heart is cold. The shadow of my past holds the key, but only you can turn it. Trust not the words of the innocent, for innocence is a mask. Find the ledger, and you will find the traitor. Victor." Crane. Collective gasp escaped the guests. Lady Eleanor's teacup rattled against its saucer, and Mr. Harrow, the butler, mopped his brow with a handkerchief. Miss Clara Winthrop, the young governess, who had remained quiet throughout the investigation, seemed to shrink further into her chair, her delicate hands twisting in her lap. "Impossible!" cried Mr. Reginald Thorne, the cheated business partner, his face flushed with indignation. "Crane's been dead for days. How could he write this?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Monsieur Thorne, the impossible is merely the improbable in disguise. This letter, it is curious, Nan. The ink is fresh, the paper uncreased, yet it bears the signature of a man who lies in the morgue. We must ask ourselves, who benefits from such a deception?" The room fell silent, each guest avoiding the other's eyes. Poirot folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket, his gaze lingering on Clara Winthrop. Her pale face and wide, frightened eyes betrayed a nervousness that had not been so pronounced before. He made a mental note but said nothing, instead turning to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, may I have your permission to examine Mr. Crane's study once more? This letter suggests a ledger, and I believe it holds answers we have yet to uncover." Lady Eleanor nodded, her composure strained but intact. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot, anything to bring this dreadful affair to an end." The study, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound books and heavy oak furniture, smelled of polished wood and old secrets. Poirot stepped inside, followed by Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional confidant, who had arrived at the manor the previous evening at Poirot's request. Hastings, ever the Englishman, adjusted his tie and surveyed the room with a mixture of awe and unease. "Bit of a grim place, isn't it, Poirot?" he remarked, running a finger along a dusty shelf. "All this talk of ledgers and betrayals feels like something out of a penny dreadful." Poirot chuckled softly. "Mon ami, the truth is often more sensational than fiction. This letter, it is no mere melodrama. It is a calculated move, designed to mislead or to reveal. We must determine which." He began his inspection, his movements precise and methodical. The desk, a massive affair, carved with intricate vines, yielded nothing at first glance. Poirot ran his fingers along its edges, probing for hidden compartments. Finding none, he turned to the bookshelves, pulling volumes at random and flipping through their pages. Hastings, eager to assist, began examining the fireplace, though his efforts were more enthusiastic than effective. As Poirot worked, his mind churned. The letter's tone was unmistakably Crane's, formal, commanding, yet tinged with paranoia. But the freshness of the ink suggested it had been written after his death, an impossibility unless someone had forged it. And the mention of a ledger, it be the same ledger hinted at in the torn photograph from Chapter 2, the one showing Crane with an unknown figure. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with possibilities. A soft creak interrupted his thoughts. Clara Winthrop stood in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly before her. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I must speak with you, alone." Hastings raised an eyebrow, but stepped outside at Poirot's nod. Clara entered, closing the door behind her. She was a slight woman, no more than 25, with auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a modest cap. Her eyes, however, held the depth of fear that belied her composed exterior. "I know about the letter," she began, her voice barely audible. I wrote it." Poirot's expression remained impassive, though his mind raced. "Mademoiselle, this is a grave admission. You claim to have forged a letter in the hand of a dead man. Hercule, why would you do such a thing?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. "I didn't mean to deceive you, Monsieur Poirot. I was desperate, Mr. Crane. He wasn't what he seemed. He was cruel, manipulative. He ruined my family years ago, and when I came to work here, I saw a chance to expose him." She hesitated, then reached into her apron pocket, producing a small, leather-bound notebook. "This is the ledger he mentioned. I found it hidden in his study weeks ago. It details his dealings, frauds, bribes, blackmail. I thought if I could make it seem as though he'd left a clue, you'd find the ledger and bring his crimes to light." Poirot took the notebook, his fingers brushing the worn leather. He opened it, scanning pages filled with neat, meticulous entries, names, dates, sums of money, and cryptic notes about leverage. It was a catalogue of Victor Crane's darker dealings, a map of his ruthless ambition. But something troubled Poirot. The ledger, while damning, did not directly point to his killer, and Clara's confession, though heartfelt, felt incomplete. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "your courage is admirable, but your story, it is not entire. This ledger, it is a piece of the puzzle. But the letter, it serves another purpose, does it not? You wished to direct suspicion, perhaps to protect someone, or to accuse another." Clara's face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, sobbing. "I didn't kill him, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it. But I know who did. I saw them that night, in the observatory. I was in the passage, fetching a book for Lady Eleanor, when I heard voices. It was Mr. Crane and someone else. They argued, and then there was a cry, and silence. I was too afraid to come forward. I wrote the letter to make you look at Mr. Thornhees, the one who hated Mr. Crane the most." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Reginald Thorne, the blustering business partner, had indeed shown open contempt for Crane, his financial ruin a motive as old as greed itself. But Clara's story raised questions. Why had she not spoken sooner? And why forge a letter rather than simply tell him what she'd heard? He knelt beside her, his voice soft but firm. "Mademoiselle, the truth, it is like a delicate flower. It must be handled with care, or it wilts. Tell me all you saw, and I shall protect you." Clara wiped her eyes, drawing a shaky breath. "It was dark, and I couldn't see clearly. But the voice, it was low, controlled, not like Mr. Thorne's bluster. I thought it might be Dr. Lennox. Dr. Marcus Lennox, the manor's physician and a guest at the fateful weekend, was a reserved man with a reputation for brilliance. He had been curiously detached throughout the investigation, offering little beyond medical expertise. Poirot recalled Lennox's steady hands as he examined Crane's body, his cool demeanor when questioned about the poison. Could he be the betrayer with a smile the letter described? Before Poirot could press further, a sharp rap sounded at the door. Hastings burst in, his face flushed. "Poirot, you'd better come quickly. There's been a discovery in the observatory." Leaving Clara with a reassuring pat on the shoulder, Poirot followed Hastings through the manor's labyrinthian corridors to the observatory, a glass-domed tower perched at the estate's edge. Inside, Lady Eleanor and several guests stood around a small table where a telescope lay askew. Beneath it, partially hidden by a velvet cloth, was a brass key, a missing key to the observatory, last mentioned in Chapter 10. "It was found by the gardener," Lady Eleanor explained, her voice tight. "He was cleaning the telescope this morning and noticed it caught in the cloth." Poirot examined the key, its surface scratched but intact. "This key, it unlocks more than a door. I think it unlocks a motive." He turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping over them. Dr. Lennox stood near the back, his expression unreadable. Mr. Thorne fidgeted, his eyes darting to the key. Miss Evelyn Carver, the jilted lover, clutched her shawl, her face pale. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments, the ledger, the letter, Clara's confession, and now the key. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry, and he was close to seeing the pattern. "Ms. Amos," he said, his voice commanding attention, "this key confirms a truth I have suspected. The observatory was not merely the scene of Mr. Crane's death, it was the heart of his secrets. The ledger Mademoiselle Winthrop has provided reveals his crimes, but it is the letter, forged though it may be, that points us to the killer's heart. I require one final piece of evidence, and then, the puzzle, it will be complete." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, but Poirot's confidence was infectious. He dismissed them, asking only Dr. Lennox to remain. The physician raised an eyebrow, but complied, his calm demeanor unshaken. Dr. Poirot began, holding the key aloft. "You have been most helpful in this investigation, yet I sense you hold something back. This key, it was found in the observatory, where you were seen the night of the murder. What did you and Mr. Crane discuss?" Lennox's smile was thin, almost amused. "You're grasping, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the observatory, yes, to borrow a book on astronomy. Crane was alive when I left him. As for the key, I know nothing of it." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his eyes gleamed with purpose. "Very well, Doctor. But know this, the truth, it cannot hide forever. The little gray cells, they are patient." As Lennox departed, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, we are close. The letter was a misstep, but it has brought us to the ledger, and the ledger to the key. Tomorrow we shall set a trap, and the killer will reveal themselves." Hastings grinned, though his confusion was evident. "A trap, Poirot? You're sure it's not Thorne or Lennox?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, Hastings. The truth lies in the shadow, as the letter said, and tomorrow we shall step into that shadow together." The chapter closed with the manor settling into an uneasy calm. The guests, reassured by Poirot's progress, yet wary of the revelations to come. Clara's confession had cleared her of murder, but exposed a deeper conspiracy, one that Poirot was determined to unravel. The ledger, the key, and the forged letter formed a constellation of clues, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instincts, was ready to chart the course to justice. Chapter 10. The Stolen Keitha. Morning mist clung to Ashford Manor like a shroud, its tendrils curling around the ancient stone walls and seeping into the crevices of the Yorkshire moors. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. The guests, now weary from days of suspicion and Poirot's relentless probing, gathered in the grand dining hall for breakfast, their faces etched with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Hercule Poirot, however, sat at the head of the table, his small, precise movements as he buttered a slice of toast, betraying none of the storm brewing in his mind. His mustache twitched slightly, a telltale sign to those who knew him that his little gray cells were at work, piecing together the fragments of Victor Crane's murder. The previous night's revelation that the governess, Miss Clara Henshaw, had forged a letter to mislead the investigation had left the household reeling. Yet Poirot's calm assurance that the truth was near had restored a fragile sense of hope. Now, as the clink of silverware filled the air, a new disturbance shattered the morning's uneasy peace. "Monsieur," Poirot exclaimed, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. He held up a small, ornate key, its brass surface glinting in the chandelier's light. "This, Ms. Amos, is the key to the observatory, where Monsieur Crane met his untimely end. And yet, this morning, it was not in its rightful place." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor Ashford, seated at the opposite end of the table, paled, her teacup trembling in her hand. Not in its place. But where was it found? Poirot's dark eyes gleamed with purpose. "It was found, Lady Eleanor, in a most curious location, the pocket of a guest's overcoat, hanging innocently in the cloakroom. And yet, this guest claims no knowledge of how it came to be there." The guests exchanged wary glances, their forks pausing mid-air. Dr. Julian Warwick, the The scientist, with a penchant for cryptic remarks, cleared his throat. "Surely, Poirot, you don't suspect one of us of stealing it. Perhaps it was misplaced during the chaos of the ball." Poirot's smile was thin, almost predatory. "Misplaced, Dr. Warwick? Non. The key was not misplaced. It was taken deliberately, hidden to conceal something within the observatory. Something, perhaps, that would reveal the truth about Monsieur Crane's death." The room fell silent, save for the faint ticking of the mantel clock. Poirot rose, his diminutive frame commanding the space. "We shall adjourn to the observatory at once. There, I believe, we will find answers." The observatory, perched at the manor's northernmost end, was a curious structure, a circular tower of weathered stone, topped with a glass dome that allowed the stars to peer down on its secrets. The guests trailed behind Poirot, their footsteps echoing on the spiral staircase. The air grew colder as they ascended, the scent of damp stone mingling with the faint metallic temps of machinery. At the top, a heavy oak door barred their path, its lock gleaming with the promise of revelation. Poirot inserted the key, turning it with a satisfying click. The door swung open, revealing a room bathed in the pale light of the morning sky. Telescopes, charts, and scientific instruments lined the walls, their polished surfaces reflecting the tension in the room. In the center stood a large oak desk, its surface cluttered with papers, vials, and a peculiar device that looked like a cross between a microscope and a mechanical puzzle. "This," Poirot announced, gesturing to the device, "was Monsieur Crane's pride and joy, a prototype funded by his vast wealth for a scientific experiment that promised to revolutionize navigation. But, alas, it failed spectacularly, I am told. And in that failure lies a motive for murder." The guests crowded closer, their curiosity piqued. Miss Beatrice Langley, the jilted lover with a penchant for dramatic outbursts, clutched her shawl. "What does this have to do with the key? Surely you don't think one of us stole it to hide some silly machine?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Not a silly machine, Mademoiselle Langley. A machine worth millions, had it succeeded. And a machine that, in its failure, ruined reputations and fortunes. The key was stolen to prevent someone, myself, perhaps, from discovering what lies within this room." He moved to the desk, his fingers brushing over a stack of papers. These documents detailed the experiment's progress, or rather, its lack thereof. Monsieur Crane was not a patient man. When the project faltered, he threatened to expose its lead scientist, Dr. Warwick, as a fraud. Dr. Warwick's face reddened, his hands clenching into fists. "That's preposterous. I am no fraud. The experiment was sound. It was Crane's impatience that doomed it. He refused to fund the final phase." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, doctor. I do not accuse you yet. But the key's disappearance suggests someone wished to keep this room's secrets hidden. Let us see what else we can uncover." He began a meticulous search, his movements precise and deliberate. The guests watched, their breaths held, as he examined the desk's drawers, the telescope's base, and the charts pinned to the walls. At last, he paused at a small, locked cabinet beneath the desk. "This," he said, "requires a second key, one that is not among those in the manor's collection." Lady Eleanor frowned. "A second key? But we have no record of such a thing, precisement," Poirot replied. "And yet, the cabinet's lock is new, unlike the others in this room. Someone has taken great care to secure its contents." He turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping over them like a spotlight. "Who among you has been to this observatory since Monsieur Crane's death? Speak now, for the truth will not remain hidden." Silence greeted his words, broken only by the faint creak of the glass dome above. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mr. Thomas Redfern, the cheated business partner, with a perpetually sour expression, stepped forward. I came here," he admitted, his voice low, "the night after Crane died. I was looking for papers, documents, that might prove he swindled me." Poirot's eyebrows arched. "And did you find these papers, Monsieur Redfern?" Redfern hesitated, his eyes darting to the cabinet. "No, the cabinet was locked, and I didn't have the key." Interesting, Poirot murmured. He knelt beside the cabinet, examining the lock with a magnifying glass. This lock has been tampered with, scratched, as if someone attempted to force it open. Yet it remains secure. Monsieur Redfern, you will forgive me if I find your story incomplete. Redfern bristled. I'm telling the truth. I didn't steal any key, and I didn't kill Crane. Poirot stood, dusting off his hands. We shall see. For now, we must open this cabinet. Lady Eleanor, may I have your permission to force the lock? She nodded, her face pale but resolute. Do what you must, Monsieur Poirot. With the aid of a small crowbar provided by the groundskeeper, Poirot pried open the cabinet. Inside lay a single item, a leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed but intact. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning the dense handwriting within. This, he said, holding it aloft, is Monsieur Crane's private journal. Not the official log of the experiment, but a personal record of his thoughts, his fears, and most importantly, his enemies. The guests leaned forward, their eyes wide. Miss Langley's voice trembled. Does it name the killer? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not in so many words, mademoiselle. But it names those he feared, those he believed might wish him harm. And it speaks of a secret secret so dangerous that it could destroy lives. He closed the notebook with a snap. I shall study this tonight. For now, the key to the observatory has been recovered, and its secrets are no longer hidden. But the second key to this cabinet remains missing. I urge the one who holds it to come forward, lest I uncover you myself. The guests dispersed, their murmurs filling the air like the rustle of leaves. Poirot lingered in the observatory, the notebook tucked under his arm. As the others descended the staircase, he approached the telescope, adjusting its focus to peer at the distant moors. The landscape was a blur of gray and green, but Poirot's mind was sharp, honing in on the threads of the mystery. That afternoon, Poirot retreated to the manor's library, the notebook spread before him on a mahogany table. The room was a sanctuary of leather-bound books and flickering candlelight, its silence broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire. He read slowly, his finger tracing Crane's hurried scrawl. The journal revealed a man consumed by paranoia. Crane had written of his distrust for nearly every guest, Dr. Warwick's ambition, Redfern's greed, Miss Langley's wounded pride. But one entry stood out, written in a trembling hand. I have seen the shadow again. It watches me, always, in the corner of my eye. I know now what it wants. If I do not act, it will be my end. Poirot leaned back, his eyes narrowing. The shadow, he murmured, the same shadow mentioned in the note found in Crane's hand. But what is it? A person, a metaphor, or something else entirely? He was interrupted by a knock at the door. The butler, Mr. Grayson, entered, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot, there's been an incident in the conservatory. Poirot rose, his movements swift. An incident? Explain, if you please. Grayson swallowed hard. It's Miss Henshaw, sir. She's been attacked. The conservatory was a glass-walled haven filled with exotic plants and the scent of damp earth. Miss Clara Henshaw sat on a wicker chair, a handkerchief pressed to her forehead, where a small cut oozed blood. The other guests hovered nearby, their faces a mix of concern and suspicion. Poirot knelt beside her, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle, tell me what happened. Clara's eyes were wide, her voice trembling. I was tending to the orchids when someone struck me from behind. I didn't see who it was, only a shadow, moving quickly. When I came to, my locket was gone. Your locket? Poirot's eyes sharpened. The one you wore at the ball. She nodded, tears welling. It was a gift from my mother. It had no value to anyone else. Poirot stood, his mind racing. The locket, the shadow, the stolen key, all were connected. He was certain. He turned to the guests. This attack was no accident. Someone sought to silence Mademoiselle Henshaw, perhaps because she knows more than she realizes. I will find this person. He dismissed the guests, save for Clara, whom he questioned further. Her story held no inconsistencies, but her fear was palpable. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, I think I saw the shadow before. The night of the ball, near the observatory. It was watching Monsieur Crane." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Merci, mademoiselle, you have been most helpful." As evening fell, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, the recovered observatory key resting on the table before him. The notebook, still unshared, lay in his lap. "Mes amis," he began. "The theft of the key was no petty crime. It was an attempt to conceal the truth about Monsieur Crane's his death. The journal confirms that Crane feared for his life, not because of the experiment's failure, but because of what it revealed, a betrayal, deep and personal, by someone in this room." Dr. Warwick scoffed. "You keep hinting at betrayal, Poirot, but you've no proof. The journal could say anything." Poirot's smile was serene. "The proof, doctor, is in the details. The stolen key, the tampered lock, the attack on Mademoiselle Henshaw point to one truth. The killer is desperate. They fear what I will find in this observatory, in this journal, and in the shadows of their own actions." He rose, the key glinting in his hand. "Tomorrow, we return to the observatory. There, I believe, we will find the second keyond with it, the final piece of this puzzle." The guests dispersed, their faces a gallery of fear, guilt, and defiance. Poirot remained, his eyes fixed on the key. The observatory held the answers, he was certain, but the shadow, whatever it was, loomed larger than ever. The next morning, Poirot led the guests back to the observatory, the notebook tucked securely in his coat. The air was thick with tension, the moors outside shrouded in fog. As they reached the oak door, Poirot paused, his hand on the key. "Before we enter," he said, "I must ask, who among you knows of the shadow Monsieur Crane feared?" The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Eleanor spoke first. "He mentioned it once, during dinner. He said it haunted him, but I thought it was his imagination." Poirot nodded. "Perhaps, but the shadow is real, mes amis, and it is here, among us." He unlocked the door, stepping inside. The observatory was as they had left it, the desk cluttered, the telescope gleaming. Poirot moved to the cabinet, now empty save for the notebook's absence. But as he turned, his eye caught a glint beneath the telescope's base, a small, silver key, half hidden in the shadows. "Voila!" he exclaimed, retrieving it. "The second key. And now, we shall see what it unlocks." He crossed to a small, ornate box on a shelf, its lock matching the key's design. With a click, the box opened, revealing a single sheet of paper. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes scanning the text. "It is a confession," he said softly. "Not from Monsieur Crane, but from someone close to him. A confession of betrayal and a motive for murder." The guests gasped, their eyes darting to one another. Poirot held up a hand. "I will not reveal its contents yet, but know this, the killer is among you, and their time is running out." The chapter closed with the guests in a state of uneasy calm, the recovery of the key and the discovery of the confession restoring a sense of progress. Yet the shadow remained, its presence felt in every glance, every whisper. Poirot, clutching the notebook and the confession, knew the truth was near, but the killer was closer still. Chapter 11. The portrait's secrets. A storm that had besieged Ashford Manor for days had finally relented, leaving a brittle calm over the Yorkshire moors. The air inside the manor, however, crackled with a different kind of tempest, one of suspicion, fear, and secrets, clawing their way to the surface. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, stood in the grand gallery of the manor, his green eyes fixed on a towering portrait of Victor Crane's late wife, Beatrice. The painting, a masterful work of oils, captured her enigmatic smile and piercing gaze, as if she were watching the unfolding drama with silent judgment. Poirot's little gray cells, ever restless, sensed that this portrait held more than artistic value, was a key to unlocking the mystery of Crane's death. The investigation had reached a fevered pitch. 10 days had passed since Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived at the manor, summoned by Lady Eleanor Ashford's desperate telegram. Victor Crane, the ruthless financier, had been found dead in the locked observatory, a cryptic note in his hand. The truth lies in the shadow. Each clue, Poirot uncovered poisoned wine, a stopped clock, a vanished will. A hidden passage had peeled back layers of deception. Yet, the killer remained elusive. Now, as the guests' nerves frayed and alibis crumbled, Poirot turned his attention to the gallery, where the past seemed to whisper truths the present could not conceal. Poirot's polished shoes clicked on the parquet floor as he approached the portrait. Hastings, trailing behind, adjusted his tie, his face etched with the weariness of a man who preferred action to deduction. "Really, Poirot," he said, stifling a yawn, "a painting? We've searched every nook of this blasted manor. What could this possibly tell us?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Monsieur Hastings, you see, but you do not observe. This portrait is not merely a likeness. It is a sentinel, guarding secrets of the heart. Beatrice Crane, she was the center of Victor's world. Yet her death is spoken of in whispers. Why?" Hastings shrugged. "She died years ago, didn't she? Tragic, but hardly relevant to a murder now." "Nan," Poirot said sharply, his finger tracing the gilded frame. "In a house such as this, the past is never irrelevant. The dead, they speak through the living. And this portrait, it has a story to tell." Lady Eleanor entered the gallery, her black silk gown rustling softly. Her face, though composed, bore the strain of hosting a house full of suspects under the shadow of murder. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "you requested to examine the gallery. Have you found something?" Poirot turned, his expression inscrutable. "Perhaps, madame. Tell me of Beatrice Crane. Her death, it was sudden, was it not?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her fingers tightening on her lace handkerchief. "Yes, a riding accident, 6 years ago. She fell from a horse on the moors. Victor was devastated. He commissioned this portrait shortly after, as a memorial." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, madame, I sense there is more. The guests, they avoid her name. Why?" Lady Eleanor's gaze flickered to the portrait, then away. "Beatrice was complicated, charming, but willful. There were rumors, jealousies, rivalries. Victor never spoke of it, but some believed her accident was no accident at all." Hastings's eyebrows shot up. "You mean someone killed her?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing his friend. "Patience, Hastings. Madame, these rumors, who spoke them?" Lady Eleanor sighed. "Margaret Vale, for one. She and Beatrice were close friends, until a whodunit and Sir Reginald Holte and Victor quarreled over Beatrice's investments. But it was all gossip, never proven." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. He stepped closer to the portrait, his fingers brushing the frame's ornate carvings. A faint click sounded, almost imperceptible, and a panel at the base of the frame sprang open, revealing a hidden compartment. Hastings gasped, but Poirot remained calm, extracting a small bundle of papers tied with a faded ribbon. The papers, yellowed with age, bore the scent of lavender and ink. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, untying the ribbon. The documents were letters, written in Beatrice's elegant hand, addressed to an unknown recipient. The first line of the topmost letter read, "My heart is yours, but our secret must remain buried." Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Aha! The portrait. It guards more than memory." Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "Letters. From Beatrice." But how? Poirot waved her question aside. "The how, madame, is simple. The why, this is what intrigues Hercule Poirot. These letters, they speak of a love forbidden, a secret that perhaps led to her death. And Victor, he kept them hidden, yet close." "Why?" Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "Love letters. But what do they have to do with Crane's murder?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Everything, mon ami. The past, it casts long shadows. These letters, they connect to our note. The truth lies in the shadow. We must learn who shared Beatrice's secret hand, who feared its exposure." Poirot summoned the guests to the gallery, a move calculated to unsettle them. The 7 suspects filed in, their faces a mosaic of dread and defiance. Margaret Vale, the opera singer, her eyes blazing with indignation. Sir Reginald Holt, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. Clara Crane, Victor's sister, her composure icy. Dr. Felix Mortimer, the chemist, fidgeting with his cufflinks. Isabelle Durant, the French heiress, her beauty masking a guarded heart. Leonard Baxter, the solicitor, his gaze darting nervously. And Emily Wren, the governess, silent but observant. Poirot held up the letters, his voice commanding the room. Mesdames et messieurs, behold a discovery most significant. These letters, hidden behind the portrait of Madame Beatrice Crane, reveal a secret that may illuminate the death of Monsieur Victor. Who among you knew of Beatrice's hidden love? A ripple of unease passed through the group. Margaret Vale stepped forward, her voice sharp. This is outrageous. Monsieur Poirot, dragging Beatrice's memory into this Victor, would be appalled. Poirot's eyes locked onto hers. Would he, mademoiselle, or did he hide these letters to protect himself or another? You were her friend. Did she confide in you? Margaret's cheeks flushed. We drifted apart. She never spoke of any lover. This is nonsense. So Reginald snorted. Nonsense. Beatrice was trouble, always, stirring up drama. If she had a lover, it's no surprise Victor kept it quiet. Clara Crane's voice cut through the tension. Enough, Reginald. My brother loved Beatrice. He wouldn't sully her memory with these games. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara. And yet, madame, he preserved these letters, hidden yet cherished. Why, unless they held a truth too dangerous to reveal? Dr. Mortimer cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. Perhaps they're irrelevant. Old love letters hardly a motive for murder. Poirot's smile was razor-sharp. Irrelevant, Docteur. Nan, every detail in a puzzle such as this has purpose. These letters, they point to a betrayal, one that perhaps led to Beatrice's death, now to Victor's. Isabelle Durant, her French accent, soft but firm, spoke up. Monsieur Poirot, Victor proposed to me. He spoke of Beatrice with love, not secrets. These letters, they must belong to someone else. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. A possibility, mademoiselle. But the handwriting, it is unmistakably Beatrice's, and you, as Victor's fiancé, did you sense his heart still belong to her? Isabelle's eyes flickered, but she held his gaze. He was devoted to me. The past was past. Poirot turned to Emily Wren, who had remained silent, her hands folded demurely. Mademoiselle Wren, you are observant. Nan, did you ever hear whispers of Beatrice's secrets among the staff? Emily's voice was quiet, but clear. The maid spoke of Beatrice's charm, but also her recklessness. They said she rode the moors alone at night, as if chasing something or someone. Poirot nodded, filing away her words. He dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain in the manor. As they dispersed, he turned to Hastings, his expression one of quiet excitement. The letters, Hastings, they are the thread that binds the past to the present. We must read them carefully. In the privacy of the library, Poirot and Hastings pored over the letters. Each was a fragment of Beatrice's heart, written to a lover she addressed only as my shadow. The letters spoke of stolen moments in the manor's gardens, of promises made under starlight, and of a fear that their love would destroy them both. One passage stood out. Victor suspects, but he cannot know. If he learns the truth, I am lost. Another letter hinted at a confrontation. He threatens to ruin us both, my love. We must act, or all is lost. Hastings, his face pale, looked up. Good Lord, Poirot, you think Beatrice was murdered, and this lover, could they be the killer now? Poirot's fingers steepled. It is possible, mon ami. Beatrice's death, it was no accident, I suspect. And Victor, he kept these letters not out of love, but as leverage or, perhaps, guilt. The killer, they feared these letters would surface. Poirot's next move was to examine the portrait's frame more closely. With Lady Eleanor's permission, he removed the painting from the wall, revealing a small safe embedded in the stone. The safe, locked with a combination, resisted Poirot's attempts to open it. Curio, he murmured. Victor, he hid more than letters. This safe, it holds the final piece of the puzzle. Lady Eleanor, watching anxiously, offered a clue. Victor was obsessed with numbers. He used the same combination for everything. His birth date reversed. Poirot tested the combination, and the safe clicked open, revealing a single document, a ledger detailing a fraudulent investment scheme. Names of investors littered the pages, including Sir Reginald Holt, Margaret Vale, and Dr. Felix Mortimer. The sums were staggering, and the scheme's collapse had ruined many. A note in Victor's hand was tucked inside. Beatrice knew. She threatened to expose me. Hastings whistled. So Beatrice found out about his fraud. And he what? Killed her to keep her quiet. Poirot shook his head. None. Hastings. Victor was ruthless, but not a murderer of his wife. The lover, the shadow, they are the key. They killed Beatrice to protect their secret. And now Victor, perhaps because he began to suspect. Poirot summoned the guests again, this time to the library. He held up the ledger, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, this ledger reveals a fraud orchestrated by Victor Crane, one that ruined many of you. Beatrice discovered it, and it cost her life. The question is, who among you was her shadow, and who killed to keep this secret buried? The room erupted in accusations. Sir Reginald pointed at Margaret, claiming she had always been jealous of Beatrice. Margaret retorted that Reginald's losses in the scheme gave him motive. Clara, her voice trembling, accused Isabel of manipulating Victor for his wealth. Poirot silenced him with a raised hand. The truth, it is close. But the killer, they are clever. They used the fraud as a distraction, knowing we would suspect those named in the ledger. He turned to Emily Wren, whose quiet presence had gone unnoticed. Mademoiselle Wren, you spoke of Beatrice's night rides. Did you ever see her companion? Emily's eyes widened, but she nodded. Once, from a distance, a figure in a cloak, near the oak in the garden. I thought it was a groundskeeper, but now, Poirot's gaze softened. Mercy, mademoiselle, you have given me the final piece. The chapter closed with Poirot standing by the library window, the ledger and letters in hand. The guests, shaken but reassured by his confidence, retired to their rooms. Hastings, ever loyal, clapped Poirot on the shoulder. You're close, aren't you? You know who it is. Poirot's smile was serene. The little gray cells, they do not fail. The shadow, it is almost in the light. Tomorrow, mon ami, we shall set the trap.